Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Bradburn. Alongside me is Logan Camden, and today we are doing a mailbag episode. We are going to be answering all of your questions because we just hit 300,000 followers on TikTok. We want that at 300 million by the end of the year, don't we, Logan? We want to just crush Mr. Beast's soul. But thank you to all of you guys for all of your support over the years. And in honor of that, we wanted to give you guys the platform, answer your questions. So we're going to be doing just that. NBA, NFL, miscellaneous, all of it. But it is mostly NBA today. And the question that we're going to start off with is actually quite similar to the question that we started our last mailbag episode off with about a month and a half ago. But clearly there is still interest in that same topic, Logan. So Roddy Piper's Ghost asks, if Jokic had never won MVP before this year, would he be the clear favorite?
I don't know about clear favorite. It is an interesting thought exercise. You know, if we could take voter fatigue out of the equation, it's hard to deny Jokic with what he's doing this year. 29, 13, and 10 on 57, 41, 80 splits, a true shooting percentage of 66%. He has a plus 21 on-off differential. I mean, it's ridiculous what he's been doing these past, 3-4 years. But this year it feels like he's taken another step up. I just can't say clear favorite because I think that just kind of undermines Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's case. I just think he's having such a tremendous year. I couldn't say clear favorite, even if Jokic didn't have one. Like, I think in a vacuum, I think this is an all-time MVP race, and I think that you could go in either direction. Like, SGA has been awesome without, in significant portions without either of his co-stars. They're great without J-Dub. They're great without Chet. They're consistently great on offense, regardless of the situation, regardless of who's on the floor. He's having a historic guard season. And so I just think we're looking at one of the all-time MVP races in NBA history, and I'm kind of 50-50 still with that. Even if voter fatigue and if Jokic hadn't, if we take away voter fatigue and if Jokic hadn't already won an MVP, I still think it's a really close race. And, even without the context, like I said, I think you can make a case for SGA, but I'm still on SGA for MVP right now.
I would take it a step further, and I would say this is definitely the best MVP race of all time. It's the best two-man race that we've ever seen. These are dudes who, in more than 90% of seasons in NBA history, either one of them is walking away with the MVP. So, do I think that Jokic would be the clear favorite if voter fatigue were not a factor, if he had not won an MVP before? No, I don't think he would be, actually. But what we definitely can say is the MVP odds would be much closer than they are. The fact that it is now a foregone conclusion that SGA is going to win, that he's a minus 3,000 on DraftKings, like that dramatic difference in odds is definitely a reflection of the fact that Jokic is being disadvantaged some in this conversation because he already has the 3 MVPs and SGA has none. But I think there are a lot of Jokic fans who are overly focused on the fact that Jokic is having an all-time great season, and they're just looking at that and saying, how could you not give this guy MVP every single time, and not acknowledging that SGA is simultaneously having a top 2 guard season this century and a historically great season in his own right, and a season that is more in line with the conventional definition of an MVP in NBA history. Now, obviously, the counter argument to that is that Jokic is having the greatest box score season ever. I do believe he's having the greatest offensive season in NBA history. I mean, 29, 13, and 10 on 66% true shooting. It's production, the likes of which we've never seen. His offensive impact, I mean, he has like a plus 20 offensive on-off, might be the largest number I've ever seen. It's obviously in the 100th percentile. So in terms of pure offensive impact and production and efficiency, yes, this is a one-of-one season in NBA history. At the same time, opposite him, SGA is giving you 33, 5, and 6 on 64% true shooting in very rarefied air in terms of the greatest scoring campaigns in the history of this league. When you look at the volume and efficiency that he has put forth, he's in a very rare club. He also has an elite on-off differential. It's not quite Jokic's number, but he's got a plus 12 on-off differential. That is still an elite number. And you mentioned how phenomenal the Thunder have been when SGA plays without any of his best teammates. He was without Chet for more than half the year, and they've gone 39-7 when SGA plays without Chet. We're talking about them playing at a 70-win pace, basically, without SGA's best teammate on the floor, without J-Dub. the Thunder are 9-0. So you're just talking about a guy who is leading his team to play like one of the best in NBA history, regardless of the absence of any of his key teammates. Because we can go further. In all minutes without Chet, when SGA is on the floor, the Thunder have a plus 20 net rating. In all minutes without Hartenstein, when SGA is on the floor, the Thunder have a plus 20 net rating. The craziest really is the minutes without J-Dub, in which OKC has a plus 24 net rating when Shai is on the floor, and he is able to give you mind-boggling production and efficiency playing this very ball-dominant, heliocentric style, giving you 40 points and 7.5 assists per 75 possessions on 67% true shooting, leading to elite team offense. Like, that is incredible. When SGA is on the floor without J-Dub and Chet, the OKC Thunder have a plus 27 net rating. When he's on the floor with no J-Dub or iHeart, they have a plus 26 net rating. Like, you have to understand, that's not something we've ever really seen in the history of this sport. One superstar being able to take any combination of his teammates and lead to an on-court net rating that would be the greatest in NBA history. Jokic has also been remarkable even when shorthanded, and has led the Nuggets to still be a very good team in minutes when he's on the floor without AG or MPJ. They have a plus 9 net rating. When he's out there without MPJ or Jamal, they have a plus 8 net rating. When he's out there without AG or Jamal, they have a plus 8.5 net rating. Like, take any of his couple of top teammates off the floor, and he is still producing incredible offensive results, because I think he's the best offensive player that we've ever seen. It's wildly impressive when you consider that, like, yeah, those numbers obviously are not close to SGA's in terms of the pure net rating, but he's also not playing with players of the same caliber as SGA's teammates. Obviously, there is a massive difference in depth between these two teams when you're talking about Cason Wallace minutes off the bench, where you're talking about Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe and Caruso and all these really good basketball players, compared to a Nuggets bench that has been very suspect and flawed all year. So both of those cases, in terms of how these guys perform without their best teammates, are very impressive, but the historical MVP precedent values that all-time ceiling raising that SGA is doing over the all-time floor raising that Jokic is doing. And I agree with that. I think that that is a logical way to treat this award. I think that elite ceiling raising is the most valuable thing that you can do in the sport of basketball, period. So that is an area in which I would lean SGA. If you look at how these guys have fared versus elite competition, that's where SGA has been at his absolute best. Versus other top 10 teams in the league by record, SGA gives you over 35 points per game on 64% true shooting, and the Thunder have an 18-6 record in those games. Jokic versus top 10 teams doesn't have the same mind-boggling, unrivaled historic production that he does in this season in totality. Like, he's still giving you 24, 12, and 10. That's great. But on 60% true shooting, and the Nuggets have struggled against the best teams in the league. He is 6-8 against top 10 teams in basketball. If you look at two-way value, obviously, that's something that the box score is not capturing. SGA has been a legitimate plus defender, with his value as a help defender, forcing steals, being a plus rim-protecting wing, racking up stocks. He is probably the 6th best defender for OKC, but they're a historic defense, and he has still been a legitimate positive contributor there, whereas Jokic has had a lot of bad nights defensively this year. I am somebody who says that he is not a minus defensively when he is engaged. He can be a solid defensive player, but this year, just Denver as a whole hasn't played up to their defensive potential. They just have been a bad defense, basically end to end this year. They're 20th in defensive rating. They're slightly worse defensively with Jokic on the floor, and I do think it's a whole team problem. I think their effort has been sporadic, to say the least. I think that they have some real issues in terms of point of attack defense, but Jokic's defensive effort, just like the entire team's, has not been there on a bunch of nights this year, and that matters in the MVP race. Night-to-night effort matters. Night-to-night availability matters, and that's another slight edge for SGA. He's played in 7 more games. He's only missed 2 games all year. He is on the floor giving you that elite two-way value every single night. So obviously, Jokic is always going to make a case. And if you think he doesn't, I can't agree with that, because I think he's having the greatest offensive season ever. But you have to understand, SGA has made the perfect conventional MVP case. Like, he is having a flawless season. He is checking every box. Elite box score production, elite efficiency, elite two-way value, elite on-off statistics, elite historic team success. Like, he's gonna put all these factors together for a 69-win team probably when he didn't have his second best player for more than half the season. So by the conventional MVP standard, I do think that he makes the slightly better case. And I think that that holds up regardless of voter fatigue. Like, I hate voter fatigue. I genuinely don't believe that I'm factoring that in this year. I just think these are two A-plus MVP cases in the scope of NBA history. And SGA has like a 1 to 2% edge.
Yeah, Carson just dropped some science on y'all.
I mean, that's what I do, man. I'm a scientist. I just think this is how MVP discourse gets, man. Both sides want to pretend that the other doesn't have a case, and it's just not true.
I don't mind people being super fascinated with it this year, though, because it is an all-time race. Like, I think the reason that it's such a heavy topic is because of how great both of these guys are at, and that I do think is encouraging. But I wish it just wouldn't get so. I wish it wouldn't get to the point where we have to, where fans who are polarized on both ends feel like they have to denigrate the other person's case, because I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's interesting because both of these guys are at an all-time peak right now, like two of the greatest ever, and that's why I think this race is interesting. But at the core, I think you hit the nail on the head with the ceiling raising thing, but I also would mention that it's not just that, too. Like, SGA gives them such a consistent floor as well. Like, it's one of the closest of all time. I don't really mind if you're on the other side of this case, and if you think Jokic deserves it, he's having an all-time season. But at the end of the day, my justification is that the difference is the team success. The difference is that they're the number one seed. That, to me, is what puts SGA over the top. It's not the be-all, end-all, but it's like that little cherry.
And I've mentioned these numbers before, but in the scope of NBA history, if you were a 65-win team, more than 3/4 of the time, you had the MVP on your roster. And there was basically a 30-year stretch from after Michael Jordan won in 1988 as the 3 seed to when Russell Westbrook won in 2017. Every single year in between those 2 seasons, the MVP was given to a top 2 seed in their conference. Now, I do not think that we should ever default to like best player on the best team. I like that we've opened up the MVP award in recent seasons to say, hey, Jokic, you can win as the 4 seed. You can win as the 6 seed because you are just clearly having the best season. Like, I do not think that it always has to go to a player on an elite basketball team, but I do think that the fact that team success has factored in so heavily before does inform to some extent what the award is, right? Because it doesn't just go to the best player in the world every single season. I still think that Jokic is clearly the best player in basketball. But when you have a guy who is playing at the historic level that SGA is, with this sort of overwhelming team success, with this sort of overwhelming impact on winning, and he's doing it for a team that, like, is going to go down in history if they maintain this level in the postseason. Like, that is such an incredible all-around case that I think that you have to at least very, very strongly value and consider it up against Jokic having such a remarkable individual season. And I do think, again, you have to consider the defense point. You have to consider just the night-to-night two-way engagement effort point. Like, even as somebody who does think Jokic is the best offensive player ever, like, you cannot ignore that as being a big part of the reason that Denver hasn't been such a great regular season team this year. It's not just him, but it's the totality of that team defense, and he has been a part of it. His limitations as a defensive player have been an issue for them. Let's keep going with the OKC questions, Logan, because we got one from Tyler. Over under 2.5 chips for OKC till 2030. And is it a failure of a run if only one ring comes out of this core?
I would say under. The only reason I would say that is I would guess 2 exactly. It's just kind of hard for me to say they're going to win 3. 2 feels about right for expectations. And before anything, I would say they just need to get 1 first. Like, this team hasn't had a championship since they were in Seattle as the Supersonics in the 70s. And I mean, you think about their old big 3 that they had, it's one of the biggest what-ifs and failures in basketball history that you didn't get a championship out of a core with Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. I mean, it's 3 MVPs. And so that's what I would say is the first monkey that Oklahoma City needs to get off their back is to just get 1. And I wouldn't say it's a failure because I think if you like, think about framing that question towards other guys who have gotten that ring. Is it a failure that we've only gotten one championship out of Giannis, despite him having this amazing 6-year peak where he's 30, 12, and 6? Is Jokic only having one championship at this point in his career? Is that a failure if only one ring comes out of it? I just think it's so hard for everything that needs to come together. I wouldn't really call anybody a failure if they end up with a championship. The thing that makes it unique with Oklahoma City is the fact that not only do they have this amazing core and amazing team now, it's the fact that they have, like 10 first-round picks over the next 5 years or something ridiculous like that. I'd say if only one comes out of it, they did their job. They brought a championship back home. So I don't think I'd call it a failure, but maybe you're disappointed. I think everything included, I think you could be disappointed with maybe only one, but I wouldn't go as far to say as to call it a failure, because you would expect, right? They've already got SGA, they've already got Chet. Like, you have the building blocks of a dynasty here. J-Dub, if you can also keep him around, I mean, that's a rock solid trio. Again, with all the first round picks, and it's not just thinking what first round picks are Oklahoma City going to use and add to this team. It's how do they pivot? You know, do they package these picks with somebody else and acquire another guy on a really good contract? It's just they have so many assets. I would expect them to. I'd say 3. 3 is my expectation long term over the next like 20 years, but I would say 2 in the next 5 I don't think is unreasonable. OKC's my favorite now, so I do expect them to get one this year. I'm kind of including that in with my expectations.
I think 2.5 is a great over-under to set till 2030. So that gives you over the next 6 years, I would expect them to win 2 to 3. I'm going to take the over because I'm such an OKC optimist, but it is difficult. I mean, we've seen the 2020s. We've had a different champion every year, and obviously Boston, at least right now, is a mega power, absolutely on the same level as OKC. So that is the challenge. However, I just think OKC is built to continue to get better and better, and that's why I would absolutely consider it a failure. If only one ring comes out of this entire, like, Shai, Chet, J-Dub era, that would be an extreme disappointment to me. And you were comparing it to Giannis and Jokic and them only having one ring. Is that a disappointment? It's a completely different situation, because those are 2 all-time great mega talents. Jokic at a top 10 peak ever, Giannis at a top
SGA
15 peak ever. Well, Logan, the difference is that the Bucks and Nuggets have really never put teams that were that great around their all-time great mega talents. Like, obviously, they were able to win the title. They put good teams around them. But what happened is that their individual mega forces reached that stratospheric level where they just weren't going to be denied. And you look at the fallout after that, and you see there were many flaws with those rosters. The Thunder have an insane roster. They are the best team ever to be this young. Chet is just going to keep getting better. J-Dub is probably going to keep getting better. Like, it's a totally different situation. The 2021 Bucks, like, that was kind of it for them. And then the next year, but Middleton gets hurt. That was an aging, declining core.
Maybe that's not my best analogy. My thing is just, like you said, we've had a different champion every single year, and it's like we can all prophesize and think that they're just going to have this run of dominance and pencil it in. It's like things change really, really rapidly in the NBA, more so over any other league. The league has never been more talented, and I think there are teams on the rise that are going to be right there neck and neck with them. Boston's not going anywhere. Cleveland's not going anywhere. I just think it's hard for me to say that year in, year out, they're just going to run through. This year, yes, I think they are my favorite. But it's like I'm just not ready. Things change so quickly in the NBA. I'm just not ready to pencil them in to win.
But why are they not better equipped to only improve from this point forward with how young their roster is, with all the assets they have?
Other teams,
like, the comparison for me would be if the 2015 Warriors, starting from that moment, were only to win one ring, would that be a disappointment? And my answer is yes. Like, that is the comparison for this. This is a team that has the talent and the ammunition and the time left to become a dynasty. It's not like Giannis and Jokic where it's like, yeah, they just have that one all-time great. And by the way, I do think it's a disappointment if both those guys end their career with only one ring. It's not on them. It's on the situation around them not being good enough, because obviously they are the level of talents where you would hope that they win multiple rings. You would hope that they make multiple finals in their prime because they're just that great. OKC, if that doesn't happen, I would just be so surprised and I would be so disappointed, because I legitimately think Chet is on a trajectory to be a top 10 player for sure, maybe a top 5 player. They have arguably the best depth in basketball. They have a historic defense that I think they can absolutely maintain. And then they do have one of those special all-time guys in SGA. So, yeah, I will take the over on this. And I would say if in totality they don't win at least 3 rings, I'd be disappointed. I think they're in that special, a historical position. We've got another question relating to both the Nuggets and Thunder, actually, from AJ. Is there a recipe for Denver to beat OKC in the playoffs? And if so, can you break down how it's possible to do it?
I guess there's a chance. This is like a Dumb and Dumber kind of chance. In my opinion, Jokic is completely unstoppable. Jamal Murray plays at a borderline star level. MPJ and Denver's supporting cast are draining threes, and I think OKC would have to be a man down. I don't know who that is, but it's one of J-Dub, Hartenstein, or Holmgren that would need to be out, or SGA, for me to think that Denver has a chance, because I think there's just a lot working against Denver in this matchup. First, I don't know who guards SGA. I think he is frying whoever they put on him, and is going to be a problem in single coverage. So I think that's an issue. My second big issue is about Denver's ability with their supporting cast to create for themselves outside of Jokic. If they can limit Jokic's impact and recover, I really worry about Jamal Murray creating his own shot against all of these great perimeter defenders. I worry about MPJ creating his own shot, Aaron Gordon. If you can limit Jokic on ball, I just don't think that there's a ton of creation individually with these guys. And OKC is just deeper. Their defense is so disruptive. We've seen it in matchups in the regular season. It's just a really, really uphill battle for Denver. So I think all those things would have to go right, but there are still concrete keys that I think really go in OKC's favor. So I lean OKC.
OKC would be a very, very, very heavy favorite in this series to me, even though we saw the Nuggets split the regular season series with them 2-2. The last meeting of the series was, in my opinion, the best offensive performance by any team that I have seen all season from Denver. It was by far the highest offensive rating that OKC has let up all year. But not only was Jokic perfect in that game, Jamal Murray was basically perfect in that game, and the Nuggets shot 56% from 3. So I think that if Denver were to somehow win this series, it would have to be because they get some outlier shooting going their way, first and foremost, because I don't think that OKC would play Jokic nearly as straight up as they did in their last couple of meetings in a playoff series. I think that realistically what Denver is going to see from most teams in the playoffs is the strategy that we saw multiple teams deploy, the Kings and the Lakers and the Celtics, where they are aggressively denying Jokic touches. They are fronting the post. They are doubling him off ball. They are just doing whatever they can to limit his touches and to force questionable shooters to make outside shots. I think that OKC would do that over the course of a full series because I just think it's the best strategy that you can deploy. And you'd be getting a lot of open threes, but they're probably going to the players who the Thunder want taking those shots. So I think Jamal would probably have to go crazy against the best perimeter defense in the league. I think that that's a really tall task. And anytime that you look at a matchup like this, you think, what's the path? It's the all-time great, best player on the planet just being that overwhelming that he can outperform the better team. But I think the gap in overall talent between OKC and Denver is really big. And again, I just think they're not going to let Jokic give you one of those crazy box score series, 30, 15, and 12. I just don't think they'd let him get enough touches. I think that they'd front the shit out of him with one of their feisty-ass wings. I think that they'd have Chet or Hartenstein there full-time with backline help, roaming off. And that's why I think it's so difficult to see Denver winning this series. Because on the other side of the ball, I just don't think they can get stops. We saw them try various pick-and-roll coverages against SGA, and he was just frying them no matter what. You have Jokic sitting in a deep drop. He's not active enough. You're conceding wide open pull-up jumpers, mid-range jumpers to SGA. That's a big problem. We saw them resort to trapping him basically when he passed half court at one point. Like, they just don't have the point of attack defense to keep him from getting wherever he wants. They'll probably try to mix in some zone. We've talked about it. OKC is the number 1 3-point shooting team in the new year since January 1st. And then I think if you look at the non-Jokic minutes, like, how is Denver going to compete with a team that has the sort of depth and overall talent that the Oklahoma City Thunder do? It's really, really difficult for me to see, even though Denver did get those 2 regular season wins. I think Denver would have to have the best shooting series of their lives, basically, and that's just not something that I would bet on. We got another question about an OKC matchup, Logan. Clearly, they are the bar, at least in the Western Conference. Cole asks, how could the Lakers match up to OKC in the Western Conference Finals, or even possibly to Cleveland or Boston in the Finals? Are there any last-minute pickups you think they could make, or anyone you like for them in the free agent market?
There's some guys I like for the Lakers in this offseason, like looking forward. I think they should re-sign DFS, maybe bring in a guy like Clint Capella on a cheap deal who can fill that simple rim protecting and rim running role. Kelly Oubre maybe on the wings. Like, the beauty of having guys like LeBron and Luka, they're really simple archetypes. You're looking for guys who can shoot threes and defend, or you're looking for guys who can defend the rim and score at the rim. Like, it's really simple. You just need guys that fit in those blank spaces. This season, I don't really know what it would take for LA. I think offensively, LA has the firepower to go toe-to-toe with anybody, with Reeves, Luka, and LeBron. Like, they're so potent there. Like, if it turns into a track meet and you're just serving buckets, trading buckets with one another, I think they can, trade haymakers with anybody. But against Oklahoma City in the West, I think Oklahoma City's got a really big size advantage that I like on the inside and a massive defensive advantage, so I still lean them. Cleveland or Boston are interesting. I think Cleveland has some weak points defensively, like if you could abuse switches on Mitchell or Garland, like that's what I would attack if I was LA, but I mean, again, that's looking deeper than the West. I have a really, really hard time seeing LA get through Oklahoma City if Oklahoma City's at full strength, but they're one of the best offenses in basketball, and that's a superpower that LA has. I mean, they can go toe-to-toe with anybody offensively, but I think it's more about what they do in this offseason, the guys they put around Luka and LeBron, and I think there's some maneuverability. Again, when you've got 2 stars like that, guys that can go superhuman at any given moment, I think you just need guys in really simple archetypes, those 3-and-D wings and those rim protecting and rim finishing bigs. I think they could find guys on cheap contracts that really improve this team in the offseason.
I think that absolutely, if you can add a high-level point of attack defender, if you can upgrade the Jackson Hayes role and just get yourself a really good lob finishing, rim protecting big, like that alongside Reeves and Luka and LeBron is a hell of a core right there. It's just obviously they are sort of having to make do with the roster that they have around those guys, and they really have not been playing good basketball as of late. Obviously, LeBron was out for a part of this stretch, but since their 8-game win streak ended over their last 13 games, they're 17th in offensive rating, they're 22nd in defensive rating, they're 21st in rebound rate. They've been one of the worst rim protecting defenses, so they have not maintained that impressive defensive level that we saw in that win streak where they were so feisty and they were so active with their small ball looks. I do think that they are better defensively than they've shown in this real down stretch, but I do still think that they have issues in terms of their rebounding on the interior. I think that they do have limitations in terms of their rim protection on the interior, and I still think that they're trying to find those lineups where they mix and match and they get that right blend of point of attack defense and offensive firepower, but Vando still a really difficult offensive player to play big minutes. And if I'm thinking about the OKC matchup, I'm just worrying about how they get stops. When you are trying to play Reeves and Luka so many minutes, and you have this OKC backcourt that is like the hardest to stay in front of in basketball, obviously, especially Shai. I just think it requires a level of athleticism and speed on the perimeter from the guard spot that the Lakers don't have if they want to have their best offensive players on the floor. And like, that's where I just think you see a huge difference from these teams in terms of their defensive ability, because OKC is just historic there. And the role player gap here is just massive. This is what sets the best three teams in basketball this year apart from basically anybody else. I mean, you can look at Denver's top end talent, and you can look at the Lakers' big three, and you can say, okay, they can go toe to toe with anybody. But then you look at the 4 through 8, and I do really like DFS. But outside of that, like, there are just such superior two-way contributors for OKC who are giving you real quality two-way minutes. And I struggle to see the Lakers making up for that gap. I just think they are going to be swarmed by this elite defense, and I still think that they can do pretty well offensively, even though they haven't played up to their offensive potential whatsoever and are still trying to figure things out on that side of the ball. But then how are they going to get stops against a team that is just so elite on both sides of the basketball? Number one offense and number one defense in the new year. I think OKC would be a real favorite in that series. It would have to be LeBron and Luka really just giving you a masterful playmaking series, I think, because I wouldn't expect OKC to let them see a whole lot of single coverage outside of Lou Dort guarding either one of those guys. And then the guys around them would have to really make shots at a high level. And I just feel so much more confident in OKC's formula. Of course, that's why they're a heavy favorite. And versus Cleveland or Boston, I think, is built to guard Luka and LeBron better than anybody because of the fact that they have two wing defenders like Tatum and Brown who physically are big and strong enough to hang with those guys in single coverage. Certainly better than any other team has two wing defenders like that. And then the totality of Boston's offensive firepower with all their shooting and mismatch attacking. I mean, they're just a flawless basketball team. So I can't say the Lakers really have much of a shot against either one of those teams unless they prove to be a really good defensive team, which I'm just not confident in. Obviously, they had a good stretch, but now it's been a really bad stretch, and I think their personnel just has certain limitations that are really difficult to overcome. Speaking of trying to hang with Boston, though, Logan, this is a question that I really like from Ian Eldridge. He asks, what can Jayson Tatum do to shake the reputation of being a tier 2 superstar? He does everything basketball-wise at a high enough level to be seen as top tier. Is the team around him the major thing hurting his perception? Even though at this point, that's ridiculous, in my opinion. What do you think, Logan?
Yeah, I don't know what Jayson Tatum, what else he can do. I think he is a tier 1 superstar, and I think if you asked enough people that are tapped in, I think they would say that he's a tier 1 superstar.
Really?
Do you not agree?
I can't put him in the same tier as Nikola Jokic.
I mean, I think he's in that top 5, and to me,
yeah, he's the 5th best player in basketball to me, but I wouldn't consider him tier 1. I almost see him in a tier of his own right now. Like, phenomenal, most versatile basketball player on the planet. But what I would say sets him apart from, like, the mega star all-time guys is the lack of an A-plus trait, like an all-time great trait.
That doesn't matter to me. So I guess we have different criteria. I just think Jayson Tatum does everything at such a high level that I don't really care that he doesn't have an A-plus thing. Like, I think Jayson Tatum just impacts the game in so many different ways. He's the cutoff to me. He's the last, like, tier 1 superstar. So I don't know. I don't know what else he can do in the eyes of the public. I guess it would be this year, put up or shut up. He's got to have a dominant finals run where his scoring and his jump shot don't disappear like they did last year, where, you know, it's not like Boston didn't have anything working against them. Kristaps Porzingis wasn't healthy, but the run through the East was pretty much a cakewalk. And then the finals mowed over Dallas. So it's like, I guess that there wasn't enough weight behind that championship, and I guess to prove himself to people, he's going to have to go and do it again and be the best player on another championship-winning basketball team. But this year, I think the jumper's got to be there. I think the scoring skill set has to be there every single night. But I think he's there. Jayson Tatum doesn't have to do anything else, in my eyes, to be considered a Tier 1 guy.
That's interesting. I think that we just have maybe different levels of leniency then in terms of who we lump into that same group. Like, I just think there's such a massive gap between what Nikola Jokić can do as a floor raiser and Jayson Tatum. I can't have them in the same tiers as basketball players.
I just think Tatum doesn't have a hole in his game. There's nothing.
I know, but like Jokić is the greatest offensive player ever. You can put any group around him and he can drag you to 50 wins.
But it's like,
we've seen him do that
here's
with
my
dudes who
thing
are
is,
literally not NBA
I
players.
know what my thing with my top 5, I know what I'm getting every single night. It's consistent impact. It's star level. It's consistent. With everybody else below Tatum, I'd say I can't confidently say that.
I understand that, and that's why, like, I do think that Tatum is locked as top 5. I just think there's a difference between Jokić being the best offensive player ever, or Shai, him being legitimately at that peak as a top 10 scorer in NBA history. And I think about if you dropped Tatum into OKC and you asked him to carry that sort of offensive load as an isolationist, running that volume pick and roll with that sort of overwhelming efficiency as a scorer and not turning the ball over, could he manufacture that sort of elite shot quality regardless of the spacing and creation around him? No, he couldn't do that. SGA gives you 6 more points per game on 5% better true shooting and leads to a better offensive rating when he's on the court in a harder offensive situation. So that's a real gap. Giannis just being one of the greatest athletes that we've ever seen, who can walk into 31, 12, and 6 on great efficiency and still give you a really high impact defensively. Like, he has that all-time physical imposition on the game on both sides of the ball. Luka, I understand if people are mad about me saying that Luka is still clearly above Tatum, because there's no question that Tatum has been the significantly better basketball player this year. But when I think about Luka last year, and I still believe that that is the player who he fundamentally is. I just think he's had a really weird year and slumping and whatnot. Like, the guy who could give you 34, 9, and 10 on 62% true shooting, just be completely unsolvable offensively when he is at his best. Not to a Jokic level, but the closest thing to it in the sport right now. There is a level of floor raising. There is a level of an ability to carry you that I just don't think that Tatum possesses because of that A-plus combination of scoring and playmaking that Luka has. So, like, I think Tatum is fantastic. I really do. I've been so impressed with him this year. I feel like I've been nothing but complimentary. It's not any flaw of his. It's just the lack of that all-time superpower that the top 4 have. And those are the only guys who are above him for me. But if he were to change the narrative, because I do think that he is underrated overall and unfairly treated, I think it's what you said. I think it's him individually having that great scoring playoff run this year, because I did think he did so many things to impact winning at such a high level in the playoff run last year. But at the end of the day, he shot 28% from 3. The scoring was inconsistent. The efficiency was bad. So it wasn't like the sort of signed, sealed, delivered, I'm here run.
Well,
like,
it wasn't
undeniable.
Jokic's dominant run. It wasn't Giannis dropping a 50-piece in the
But
finals.
it's not just that. It wasn't even Jayson Tatum's best basketball. It wasn't even him playing up to the level that he's capable of, which isn't what those guys could do. But it is.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, those guys
than
played to what you expect in their dominant level, and we didn't get that from Tatum, and they still won the championship. And the last part of his question, I do think that's 100% a part of it. It's the team around him. It's people saying that Boston is a juggernaut, which they are, but I think sometimes it can kind of be unfairly used as an argument against Tatum.
Yeah, it's so tricky because there's 2 sides to it. Like, I think it is lame to discredit him due to his situation at this point, because I just think he's shown himself to be a really high impact, extremely versatile defensive player, a basically elite playmaker, right? One of the 15 best playmakers in basketball, one of maybe the 10 best scorers in basketball. Like, he can be, as we've said recently, the best scorer, the best passer, the best rebounder, the best overall defender on a title team. That's a special thing, and he slots into that role so nicely with Boston. At the same time, Boston is one of the most talented teams ever on both sides of the basketball. He does get to play with heavenly spacing and an unbelievable amount of talent all around him. So, like, there's 2 sides to it, and I end up just coming down on the fact that, like, he's a perfect fit for Boston. He is clearly capable of being the best player on a title team, and he's the 5th best guy in basketball. But sometimes I do see some stuff with Tatum that's still kind of crazy. I don't know. There was a tweet going around this past week of, oh, he's clearly better than D-Wade, and if you don't think that, the only thing that's keeping you back from it is that you're blinded by nostalgia. And I was just like, all right, see, haven't seen one of those takes in a while, but that's kind of annoying. And then you do have to acknowledge the privilege of the situation. Nas to San Antonio asks, presuming Wemby's health, which is likely as he's expected to participate in Euroball this summer, could the Spurs be a top 3 seed next season if they get a Naz Reid or Cam Johnson level guy this offseason? They have 2 good first-round picks this draft and have had a positive net rating without Fox and Wemby. What do you think, Logan? Could the Spurs be a top 3 seed next season if they get a trade like that?
A top 3 seed is a little lofty expectation-wise for me, just with some of the stability at the top of the West. Like, I don't think Houston's going anywhere. I think they have a recipe to be a rock-solid regular season team again. The Dubs, the Lakers, like Memphis isn't going anywhere. There's a lot of – the West is just so damn tough. Like Minnesota, I could see any of these teams fluctuating. It's going to be a dogfight. That being said, I do think the Spurs are bound for a lot of improvement and at least to be a playoff lock next season if something like that happens. Because I think Naz Reid or Cam Johnson, that's a perfect, third partner in crime for Fox and Wemby, like a guy who can slot in alongside them, who can space the floor, who can handle a little bit if it's a Naz Reid, who can defend if it's a Cam Johnson, would be elite for spacing. And the first-round pick, I think, is even more interesting because it's like, what young guy are they going to get in here that adds into this recipe? So top 3, I think, is a little bit lofty. I think a little bit unrealistic. But playoff lock, I think, is definitely attainable. The only reason I think it's going to take a little bit to get the Fox-Wemby fit down pat, right? It just normally takes a little bit for duos to figure it out. And then, I don't know, the West is just super tough, but I think they can make the playoffs next year.
Definitely. That should be the expectation, even though the West is very, very tough. I would love a Cam Johnson ad for them. I mean, I'm just really high on Cam Johnson basically being a big plus anywhere you put him because that sort of elite shooting at that size with very solid defense. It's just such a valuable thing. He's got such a lean, efficient offensive game. Still, though, like, the Spurs are pretty far away at this point. I do like the Fox edition. I'm optimistic that he and Wemby are going to have a nice 2-man game, and I think that they just needed to add that sort of high-level guard alongside him, and Fox is that. I mean, especially as a scorer, he is a star-level creator. The thing is, they're still going to be playing a lot of young guys, man. Like, let's say even if they hit on their picks in the lottery this year, you're going to want to play those guys. You're going to want to develop those guys, and those are rookies. It's just very rare that rookies are like actual positive contributors. Even think about Stephon Castle this year, who is obviously very talented, and he clearly has improved as the season's gone along, but like with his efficiency, is that a guy who as a rookie was ready to slot into like a big impact winning role? No, that just very, very rarely happens with rookies, especially a rookie guard if they take one of those guys. So it's hard for me to see a top 3 seed when you're playing that many young guys. It's not impossible because like they are young, so they'll have energy. If they play really hard in the regular season, you could see it happening. The West is pretty bunched up in the standings after OKC this year, and I think that could be the case again going forward, although I think if the Lakers improve their roster, they could be a pretty elite regular season team. I think the Nuggets could be a pretty elite regular season team. So there is still some really high-level teams in the West. I think Wemby would have to take an offensive leap for this to happen. And I think the team around Wemby just has to improve defensively because they have been so bad defensively this year when Wemby is not on the floor. I think your expectation should be like, let's get into the playoffs. And I would love a Cam Johnson addition again. I think if you can make that happen. I know that Nas to San Antonio is in your username, so clearly you want that to happen very much. I don't think that that's quite as seamless a fit But if you got a Cam Johnson, I think you'd be in a great position. I think if you were like the 6th seed, you should consider that a success. Top 3 seed, it's ambitious for just year 3 for Wemby, considering the circumstances around him. Dave Canales lover asks, do you think the T-Wolves can make a run if they get the 6th seed?
If they get the 6 or 7 seed, I think it's a great outcome for Minnesota because you would think they'd either draw Denver or Houston. Denver, they've got the recipe against, great defense, can guard Jokic as good as anybody can. Nobody can guard Anthony Edwards, and we saw it last year when they beat them. So I like both outcomes if they drew Denver or if they drew Houston, just because I think Houston is also susceptible. I think Anthony Edwards would be the best player in that series. I don't want to beat a dead horse, so I'm not going to build this thing up or lead you guys along. I just don't want to bet on Julius Randle. We talk about this a lot. So I just don't want to be super negative. Like, we talk about it all the time. He's one of the biggest playoff droppers. I need to see it with Julius. The Timberwolves have been playing great basketball. Shout out Jalen Clark. Shout out Dilly. Shout out Julius for playing good basketball recently. I really like a lot of the stuff that the Timberwolves are doing right now. I got to see it with Julius, and I'm just going to keep holding on to that until I do. So I hope Minnesota proves me wrong. I like Minnesota. I love Anthony Edwards. He's one of my favorite players on the planet, but I got to see it first.
I do think that this would be a really good landing spot for them in the standings to try to make a run, because Denver is a great matchup for them. Like we've just seen, they swept the regular season series. They beat them last year. Obviously, that was with Cat, who I do think is just a better player and is a more impactful guy on both sides of the ball in this matchup than Julius Randle. But, I mean, they blew out the Nuggets twice this year. Part of that was very poor effort from the Nuggets defensively, just not being connected, like not even really closing out, just being disengaged. But you mentioned they have several key advantages in this matchup. Anthony Edwards feasts versus the Nuggets. They cannot contain him at the point of attack. Nobody is athletic enough. Nobody's just got the combination of size, speed, and strength that you need to deal with Ant. And then he just abuses Jokic's lack of rim protection and gets to and finishes at the rim in this specific matchup at a really high rate, higher than his average. On the flip side, they guard Jamal Murray really, really well because they have such phenomenal point of attack defense. I do think that Jokic would be able to basically get what he wants against them. Like, I do think that he matches up better against the Timberwolves in a post-Cat world. I think that he was so valuable for them as a massive post defender, allowing Rudy to roam off and be his most impactful as a help defender. But you feel like the Timberwolves have a really good chance of beating the Nuggets. And then you could get the Rockets, because Houston's probably going to finish in that 2 seed, but maybe Denver steals it from them. But if you did get the Rockets in the second round, I would absolutely pick Minnesota to win that series. I'd pick anybody to beat Houston in the playoffs. Like, I just think that Houston's half-court offense is so much worse than any of the alternatives. Or you could be getting whoever upsets Houston in the first round, like if that's the Warriors or the Clippers. And those are really good teams. Like, I definitely would pick the Clippers to beat the Timberwolves. I just have so much confidence in them on both sides of the ball. I trust their offense more than I do Minnesota's. The Warriors would be an interesting dynamic because they're just such different teams. Minnesota would have such a size advantage, but the Warriors have their speed. They have their excellent spacing. So, like, I wouldn't be confident in Minnesota making a run because even though their offense has been very good post All-Star break, I still have my concerns about Julius Randle in a playoff series. I do think the teams are going to really test Ant as a playmaker. Like, I just see more worlds in which their offense breaks down than a lot of the alternatives, but it's definitely not impossible. Like, if their path is Denver into Houston, or if they get Houston in the first round, like, those are good matchups for them. And obviously, as long as you're avoiding OKC, like, you're getting kind of lucky in the scheme of things, because that's where the real gap is. The finals are here, and the only thing for sure is it's the last time to bet on college basketball this season. It's been an amazing ride to get here, full of the unexpected happening. Maybe there will be more. Get in on all the action, expected and unexpected, with DraftKings Sportsbook. With live betting, exclusive content, promos, and parlays, DraftKings is the ultimate college basketball destination for March.
Ready to make your first bet? Check out the matchups and pick a team to win. It's that simple. And if it's your first time, here's something special just for you. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly.
Bet the unexpected with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. Brett Gucker asks, what is Evan Mobley's ceiling, Logan? Just say it. Best player of all time.
I think he can be a top 5 player on the planet. I really do. You're looking at a guy who could be top 5 best defender on the planet, which I think he already is. He's a one-man defense. As close as you can get to a Wemby. A dominant rim protector, one of the most switchable bigs on the planet, which he already is. A guy who protects the rim at a high level and who can also lock up elite scoring wings. And then offensively, we've seen his game grow this season, but primarily an elite roll man and lob threat. And this is maxed out Mobley. This is demigod Mobley, what I'm thinking about here. A guy who can initiate from the perimeter a little bit, who can attack mismatches at a really high level, and a guy who's a really reliable jump shooter. And so if he does all those things at a high level, I think he's a top 5 player on the planet. He's not perfect offensively, nowhere close, but he's grown. He's initiated more than he has. He's run more pick and roll. He's more confident attacking mismatches. He's shooting more confidently than he ever has before. He's shown a willingness to attack and go get his own bucket in a way that he never has before. And so he's growing into it at a decent rate right now. But I think there's more to tap into, and I think if he maxes out in those areas, I think you're looking at a guy that could be a top 5 player on the planet. I really do with Mobley.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think that fringe top 5, I can't see him climbing into that absolute top tier that we were talking about earlier, right? Of those just
even with
all-time forces.
Even with the totality of his two-way ability.
I cannot see him reaching the level of offensive production that would be required for him to rival even as a two-way force.
What's the
number? Dudes we're talking about as the top 3, top 4 players in the world right now, which is Jokic, Giannis, SGA. Next generation, it's going to be still Luka and SGA and Wemby, and maybe Ant climbs up there. Chet obviously is going to be in the mix, although I think that he could push a couple of those guys. For his offensive production?
Offense, points and assists. What's the thresholds?
To get into those conversations?
Yeah.
I mean, he'd have to be north of a 25-point per game scorer, I think. He'd have to be giving you, at least 25, 12, and 5 while being in the conversation for best defensive player on the planet.
I can see him getting close.
Maybe, man. But, we're just talking about all-time greats, man. Again, dudes who have absolute historic superpowers when you're talking about that top tier. I think that Mobley slots right into that next group where it's I think he'll be probably, at his best, 5th to 10th best player in the world. I think that that's a good expectation for him. I do think that he's just going to keep getting better, and I think that the couple of key areas that will determine his absolute ceiling are what level does he reach as a shooter, because that could be a big one, right? He's obviously improved dramatically this year, but can he continue to speed up his release? Can he continue to improve in terms of his ability to shoot in tight windows as he's drawing a closeout? Can he become a 40% three-point shooter and increase his volume? That would be really big for his offensive game. And then what level of mismatch attacker, post scorer can he become? I think that he's already improved dramatically there. He's gotten more patient attacking mismatches and scoring out of the post. He's gotten more comfortable playing with physicality. That's a big dimension he's added to his game. But can he get to the point where it's you can't switch smaller guys onto him? Can he get to the point where he's legitimately efficient post scorer, which he still isn't yet, right? Can his touch improve? Because right now he's got decent touch, but not elite touch. And then I would say, how much can you tap into his playmaking and how much of an offensive hub can he become for you as a passer? Because I think that he's already a rarely gifted passer for a big, but he's not a special passer, right? Like, he's a good one. Could he get to the point, though, where he's averaging north of 6 assists a game for you and doing some more complex stuff where he's drawing more attention as a scorer out of the post, drawing double teams, and then he can pick you apart as a passer out of that instead of his current role, which is initiating a lot of actions from the top of the key, running handoffs for you and whatnot. And he's very good at all that stuff, making those more simple decisions as a passer. But I think he is going to be north of a 20-point per game scorer. I think he already could have been that this year if you just gave him more minutes. And then when you're talking about a guy with his passing impact, with his defensive versatility, being a top 3 defender on the planet, like, that's a flat-out superstar. It's just, again, higher than fringe top 5 is all-time great, basically. It is, you can carry a team like we're talking about these top-tier MVP candidates doing. And it's a little hard for me to see Mobley doing that because realistically, do I ever expect him to be like some really high-end shooter? No, that would surprise me. Do I think his touch is going to dramatically improve?
High-end, I don't think is even necessary. I think the guy that we always use, I mean, say he gets to like an Aaron Gordon level, a 35 to like 36% off ball, he's reliable, right?
He's already better than every Aaron Gordon season before this one because Aaron Gordon's been on crack as a shooter this year. Mobley's a very solid shooter.
Yeah,
but I'm just saying.
I don't think elite. I mean, I don't think he has to reach that level though to be in. I think he needs to be an elite roll man, an elite lob threat, an elite mismatch attacker. I think he can be a good and capable shooter and could creep into that. I don't think it has to be like I don't think he has to be like a high volume guy or like
I'm just talking about improving to the point where, like, could he be taking 5 threes a game for you, making 38% of them? Like, it's more an issue of volume than percentage because his percentage is already pretty good.
I don't think he needs to. I don't think he needs that to creep into the conversations we're talking about. He's so good defensively.
A tier 1 superstar?
Yeah, I think he would have to be. Well, I think he could be so much better.
I hate when you make me do this, Logan. I hate when you make me argue against my guys. I don't know. Do you
understand what I'm saying, though? I think he could be such a high-level lob threat, roll man, and mismatch attacker on the low block. Threat. Yeah.
I mean, that's not really his game. I wouldn't say that he's an elite roll man scorer. He's not like a high-end vertical spacer.
I'm saying that he could. I think those areas are more important than him becoming like an elite jump shooter. I'm not saying in these conversations.
I told you the bar. I don't think 5 3 attempts per game and 38% from 3 is an elite jump shooter. I think that's a very good jump shooter. I do think if you want him to be, like, you're talking about pushing back on me saying fringe top 5 players. So I'm trying to figure out that bar is crazy high, bro. That bar is crazy high. That's not marginal improvement. That's like, we're talking about an all-time player.
I think he could do that with 3 to 4 3 attempts a night. Like, I don't think it needs.
That's what he's already doing. He's already taking 3 threes a game.
I don't think he needs to become a. I don't think he needs to take another jump shooting leap like that.
I don't know, man. I think that you are maybe higher on his scoring ability than I am. Like, I still look at Chet and I clearly see a higher ceiling as a scorer with Chet because of the
right now. Yeah,
as a ball handler, because of the
shooting. Couldn't rule it out with Mobley's leap that he's taken this season.
He's gotten a lot better, but again, like, he doesn't have that elite ball handling like a Chet Holmgren, that elite fluidity. He's very good for his size in those categories. He doesn't have that elite shooting ability. He does not have elite strength, even though he's improved there. Like, he can leverage his physical advantages in certain matchups, not in all matchups. He's not somebody who's going to go out there and post up other bigs with a ton of success. And, like, I just think you have to have high-level offensive weaponry to be the sort of player who you're talking about, which is an all-time great basketball player. If you're pushing back on me saying, yeah, I think he can be a fringe top 5 player in this league. I think he's going to be so impactful in so many ways, but I just think he's always going to be best suited in like a really high-end complementary offensive role, doing a bunch of different things for you at a high level. Like, he's good at everything, and that's why I was so crazy high on him as a prospect, and I'm so crazy high on him still. Like, I think he's going to be a superstar with his elite all-around impact, but to be a 25-plus point per game scorer, you have to have an elite scoring trait, and I don't think he has that. Like, across ISOs and post-ups and inverted pick and roll, which is obviously another really cool thing that Mobley's added to his bag this year. Across those like 3 on-ball play types, he's still generating like 0.8 points per possession for you this year, which is just not a very good number. That's around like the 30th percentile. Now, it's awesome that he can do that for you at his size, but that's complementary stuff. It's additional. It's not bread and butter, and I think that he would have to get significantly better at those things to be, again, one of the 3-4 best players in basketball. I'm comfortable with fringe top 5. I think he's a monster. Again, I can't believe you make me do this, Logan. I can't believe you make me argue against my beloved so much, but I'm comfortable with saying fringe top 5 player is his ceiling. Tyler Key asks, how do you fix the Nuggets roster situation and salary cap issue this offseason? Is trading MPJ the only realistic option?
I don't think it's the only realistic option. I kind of think you got to ride it out with this current iteration of the Nuggets with Murray and MPJ. I just don't. The NBA moves really, really fast, and so I couldn't say I wouldn't ever see someone becoming available that they could make, MPJ expendable for, just because stars become available all the time. But I would have a really hard time imagining them improving after dealing Murray or MPJ. And I still think they're really, really complimentary to Jokic, but they are in a bit of a bind. But I think you ride out the current contracts that you have with Murray and MPJ, and you just keep improving on the margins. You hope that Holmes can come in here next season and be really productive off the bench. You're going to hold on to Brown. You're going to hold on to Peyton Watson. I don't have a good answer. I mean, find budget free agents, try to hit on picks in the draft. I don't know. I don't know who off the top of my head you could move MPJ for and improve. I think they need him. I think they need a guy like MPJ. Like, I just worry about the team's spacing and reliable shooting. I think he provides a really, really critical role for this team that he's not expendable right now. Like I said, like if there's a star that becomes available that I don't see right now, maybe I would entertain it. Like, he's not untouchable, but I can't see them improving after dealing like an MPJ or a Murray.
I don't totally agree with that. I don't think that MPJ is the problem in Denver. I think that he is an excellent offensive fit. I think that obviously you can win a title with him as your number 3 offensive option in this situation, playing alongside Jokic, where he has such a great shot diet created for him, and he can just be that elite pure shooter and a very good cutter and an off-ball scorer who doesn't have the burden of creation. Jokic enables him to thrive in that role, but the reality is just that in this post-KCP world, like, the Nuggets have to improve defensively. They have to find a way to improve defensively because you are not winning the title as the number 20 ranked defense. And even if I think part of that is effort-based this year, the personnel is also just flat out not good enough. I think that specifically they have to improve in terms of their point of attack defense. They have to improve on the perimeter because obviously Jokic is going to be their center for the foreseeable future. There is one trade idea that I came up with that I think is interesting with MPJ, Logan, and I want to know what you think. What if you said to Miami, we're going to give you MPJ in a second for Andrew Wiggins and Nikola Jokić?
That's crazy. I was just about to suggest almost the same thing, but I don't know if the money would work.
You and I share one soul, Logan. The money would work. The money would work.
Instead of Jovic, that's why I mentioned I was going to suggest Duncan Robinson, but I didn't know if the money would work with Duncan's contract. But I like that deal too. Wiggins was the first guy that I thought of as well.
Because MPJ is such a good offensive player in this situation, but obviously still has his limitations as a defender. Can do some solid stuff for you as a backline helper and rebounder. He's solid in that role, but he's not a high-level perimeter defender, of course. Not somebody you can take on those point-of-attack matchups. Andrew Wiggins is a damn good perimeter defender when he wants to be, and you're paying MPJ almost $40 million. So if you can turn that contract into a really good two-way wing who is cheaper, like a Wiggins, and you can carve some extra depth out of it, like getting a Nikola Jokić, who, by the way, that's probably not realistic, especially because this is Miami and we know how they covet their younger players and they want to make every single trade such a bitch. And, like, Jokić is legitimately really good. I was just thinking that would be a fantastic ad because then you get an offensive wing with good feel and size and shooting ability who's also a very solid defensive player. The reality is you just have to find a way to improve your point of attack defense and to improve your depth. And if the only way to do that is to get off of a big contract like MPJ's, then I can see that. I do believe in the big four that Denver has being like the best offensive big four in basketball. How much of that is just Jokic amplifying everybody around him? I do think that that's clearly part of it. But I also think that Jamal, when he's right and is on, is such a phenomenal complement to Jokic in the two-man game with his pull-up shooting. And MPJ is one of the best pure shooters and such a great off-ball scorer. And Aaron Gordon is so good with his feel and chemistry with Jokic and obviously what he does as a play finisher and cutter in the dunker spot and all that. Like, it's a great formula. But if you were to lose something offensively, going from MPJ to a Wiggins, I think you could offset that by what you're gaining defensively and in terms of improving your depth, because that just has to happen. And you have to get better at backup center, which hopefully happens with Deron Holmes. I do think the development of Peyton Watson is going to be huge. Like, what level offensive player can he become? Because I think that there have been some positive indicators this year. I think that in transition, obviously, he runs the floor well. I think he's got good feel as a cutter, and the shot has improved, but that's really what this is going to hinge on. How legitimate a shooter can he be? So I would be willing to move off of an MPJ. I think that sometimes he's treated unfairly as kind of a scapegoat. It's not anything that's specifically about him. It's just the Nuggets have invested heavily in a core that is very lacking defensively right now. That's basically what it comes down to, and you got to address that one way or another.
I'm in the lab cooking up right now, man.
Okay. What do you got?
I don't know if this makes any sense at all because I'm trying to make the money work. The framework was MPJ, Najee, and Saric with some filler contracts for Jeremy Grant, Denny Avdia, and Robert Williams III.
Wow.
It's a lot, but I feel like it addresses some things for Denver.
I mean, it does. Jeremy Grant has had a horrible, horrible season. But Denny, I do think, would be a really interesting fit in Denver. I think he'd be a positive two-way contributor for them, for sure. Really good versatile wing.
If Time Lord was healthy, you have a look.
Time Lord was healthy, that'd be great.
Yeah. Or, I mean, maybe you leave Rob out of it. And I was just trying to maximize MPJ's value. Maybe you leave Rob out of it and hope that Holmes is the answer.
Are the contracts going to work, though?
The contracts weren't. That's what I've been working away at. Yeah, because I was going to say,
that's a lot of money for Denver to take on. I'm not going to lie. I really like them targeting Wiggins. I think that Andrew Wiggins, when you have him playing a role, can be such a good two-way third, fourth option for you offensively. I think the defensive front court tandem of him and Aaron Gordon, I think that they could take on a lot of matchups. And everybody in NBA history looks better offensively alongside Nikola Jokic. Like, that's something to consider. Wiggins is already giving you 18 points per game on 57% true shooting this year. How about when you are able to tap into his athleticism as a cutter in a way that you literally never have before because everybody cuts more with Jokic? How about when you manufacture more wide open threes off the catch for him? You simplify everything. You make him more efficient. He might just be a better player flat out than MPJ in that situation once you get the Jokic boost offensively. So I can see that being the path because something does have to change if they want to be firmly in those title contender conversations that they should be in with Jokic in the heart of his prime. And it's not just about guys playing better. And I don't think you can just bank on development. Like, is Christian Brown going to dramatically improve to the point where, like, he can be your lead point of attack defender? I'm not confident in that. So I can see the MPJ trade happening. Leo says, you guys talked about your favorite prospects for this year's draft last episode, but where would you like to see those guys land? I would love to see Flag go to Washington.
Washington works. I honestly think Flag's one of those guys that could go anywhere, and he's going to have an immediate impact and be a good fit for any team because he's so malleable. He just impacts the game in every way. A winning impact, defensively, on the glass, scoring, playmaking. I think he's the total package. I'd selfishly like to see Flag go to San Antonio just because Fox, Wemby, and him, that just seems like a trio for the future. And Ideally, I'd like to see Flag go to a spot where he wouldn't have that massive scoring burden on his shoulders immediately, or have that burden of being the offensive number one, where he can be an off-ball guy and be that kind of connecting asset immediately, and be in a winning situation where if he went to Washington, maybe he toils away in the bottom of the East for a few years before everybody develops. So, selfishly, to start with Flag, I'd like to see him go to San Antonio.
I'd like to see Cooper Flag go just about anywhere, man. I mean, I would like to see him go to Washington and just complete what should be such a nasty defensive core with him and Sarr and Koulibaly. San Antonio, yeah, I mean, that's just a dream come true. I think that you put him alongside a high-level guard and a dominant big, and he can just be the perfect do-it-all wing. He can be connective for you offensively. He can be such an impactful, versatile defensive player, and then obviously can still pick his spots and be a really high-impact creator and scorer offensively. And that would just lock in such an incredible core. And as much as I love the Thunder, if you were telling me that you could put together a Flag-Wemby duo with Fox as the third guy to rival them, that would just be great for basketball. So that would probably be my favorite choice as well. But I'd also like to see him go to New Orleans. I just want to see Zion get some help. Cooper Flag should be sick pretty much anywhere.
I've got a fun landing spot for New Orleans. I'd love to see Dylan Harper go there to pair with Zion, because I look at what New Orleans is cooking up. And I think a wing like Flag could be interesting, but I think they've got their wing of the future in Trey Murphy. They've got another defensive wing that I really like in Herb Jones, and I'm not really thinking about McCollum or DeJounte Murray. They don't really factor into any of my long-term plans when I think about this team. So I think you get Dylan Harper. You finally give a guard that can pair with Zion and be a nasty 1-2 combo, elite pick-and-roll duo. And I think Dylan Harper has all-star upside. So to me, that seems like the biggest hole in their team. And I would really like to get that for Zion.
Logan, I'm glad that you said that, because we do actually have a question about the Pelicans' future. This is from Nick. He says, if the Pels got a serious point guard and a stretch five, could the core of Herb, Trey, Zion, this year's lottery pick, be a contender? And what point guard or center could they likely acquire in the next 2 to 3 years? The exact guy I thought of was Dylan Harper. I think if they could get Dylan Harper,
I think
which
so too,
means they're going to have to get the second pick, maybe you would prefer to have somebody who is going to be a reliable high-level shooter in that spot, so they can be a guaranteed valuable piece off ball alongside Zion. But I just think Dylan Harper is so clear of every other guard in this class. I do think that he is the guy who has that clear star ceiling. I mean, we just talked about him last episode, but his ability to get to and finish at the rim, his rim pressure and his craft down there, and he's a really good playmaker. I just want that kind of offensive juice alongside Zion, and then Herb and Trey obviously play their role at a really high level.
He's 6'6" too, so you think about this lineup, they're not going to have any weak points. They're going to be jumbo size. They should be really, really switchable. The 5 spot, I'm really disappointed that New Orleans last season didn't take Kyle Filipowski. Now, I don't know if he's the ideal guy, just because I'd like to have a really, really impactful rim protector, and so honestly, with Zion, I know it's a weird fit, and ideally you'd like to have a really skilled stretch big alongside him. Like a Cat maybe, but again, you want to be able to protect the rim, so that's a really unique skill set, like a Miles Turner, obviously, right? That's the ideal guy. I wonder if it might just be worth it. Your spacing wouldn't be as good, and you'd be sacrificing. I wonder if it would be better to just get a really simple, rim protector and play finisher, in there.
Could it be Yves Missi?
Maybe. I still like Missi. I think there's something there. And Missi had some shooting touch that he flashed when he was in college. I don't know how much I'm into that. I really would have liked if. I think the guy, like I said,
I know, Khalil
Ware would have been the guy.
It's truly a bummer, because I actually think that would be a real game changer.
That'd be a potent front
for
court.
The Pelicans franchise. I mean, I just think he's perfect. He's the rim protector. He's the offensive complement. He's exactly the sort of big you want alongside Zion, and he's already so good. That is a big-time bummer. But, yeah, I agree. There was another guy who I thought of. Maybe you could buy low on Wendell Carter Jr. and you could just say, hey, we think you're going to find your
I
three
like
ball
that.
again because
I
he's had
like
such a
that a
bad
lot. I
shooting
mean, and he's
season.
a legitimately good mid-range shooter.
I just think he's having a bad shooting season. I think that he's proven himself to be a legitimate floor spacer and a versatile, very solid defensive big. He's obviously not the game-changing high-end talent, but I think that he's a nice fit here. So, yeah, the challenge is going to be how do you get off of some of these contracts? Like, I don't know. It's just the Pelicans are so messy,
You got to deal.
man.
You got to deal McCollum. You got to deal DeJounte, man. You got to find somebody willing to take those guys.
Absolutely. And CJ's going to be an expiring next year, so maybe he's not as hard to offload, but I don't see anybody actually wanting him. So, like, maybe you're attaching a second with him or something. You're not getting anything good back. And then DeJounte is kind of harder because he's on more of a long-term deal. He is younger, but I just wouldn't want to touch him, man. I just think he got so overrated and is such a clunky, inefficient offensive player. Weird fit in most situations. But if we could create this beautiful reality where they're free of those guys and you have a core of Dylan Harper, Herb, Trey Murphy, Zion, and let's say Wendell Carter Jr., is that a team that's contending for the title? Probably not. I mean, unless Dylan Harper gets a lot better, a few years down the line maybe. But I think that that's certainly better than what they have now. That's a legitimate playoff team. And obviously the big question with all of this is just, can Zion stay healthy? And we don't know. But if we're optimistic, I think that'd be a good way to go about building around him.
Yeah, I know we differed on the third guy in the class. So my third guy was Derek Queen. I'd like to see Queen. We were talking about some of his limitations and how he might not play the 5 spot at the next level just because he's not going to be super impactful defensively there. I think there's a good solution, and that's to send him to a team with a guy who's already holding down the 5 spot defensively. So I would love to see Derek Queen go to Washington or Brooklyn. Stays close to home, or at least a college in Maryland. You pair him alongside a guy who's not super skilled like Sarr, and I think you've got an interesting look there where you're not giving up a ton of size. Both of those guys are decently mobile. You're not asking him to hold down the 5 spot, so he's not a glaring weak point. And then offensively, super skilled, and he's a guy who can actually go down low and do some of the dirty work that Sarr isn't really willing to do right now at this point in his career. And then similar thought process with Claxton. Claxton's a rim runner and a rim protector, but Queen could be the finesse big alongside him. So talked about it a little bit last episode. These double big lineups are kind of coming back in a big way, and I know you have your concerns with him as a big man at the 5 spot, but maybe we just don't even worry about that. Maybe we play him alongside a real 5, let him run at the 4 spot at his natural position, and let him go to work. So I think that's the ideal fit. If it's Washington or if it's Brooklyn or if it's just another team that already has that rim protecting 5, I think Queen could spot in as that skilled 4 alongside a guy in that archetype.
That's interesting. I do think playing him alongside an unskilled 5 like a Claxton, there's a little bit of clunkiness there, but I do kind of think there's a little bit of clunkiness with Queen in kind of any situation. That's why I'm a little lower on him than you are. I do think if we're looking at some of these other top prospects, we were just talking about Dylan Harper to New Orleans, but if they can't land him, I do think his Rutgers teammate Ace Bailey could be pretty interesting in New Orleans. They need to get that guard, and maybe you're saying, okay, well, they already have the wings they need. But I've always thought maximizing Zion is about maximizing the shooting and maximizing the defense around him. And if you get the best version of Ace Bailey, that is a hell of a lethal off-ball scorer and particularly an elite shooter. And if he buys in defensively, he's got the tools to be a real plus there as well. So you could just kind of become wing utopia and maybe get him. And that could be cool.
I don't hate that. My next 2 prospects, including Bailey, I actually have going to the same team. I think Ace Bailey would be a lot of fun in Charlotte. Now, the reason I say that is just because I think Charlotte would be such a fun team to watch. I don't know if they're going to be doing a whole lot of winning, but they're going to be fun. You put him with LaMelo Ball. I mean, LaMelo is going to be a guy that is going to be able to feed Ace buckets, and that was my thought was I like that because Zion could play that point role and feed him buckets, right? Bailey is a cutter with a runway off of Zion drives or is just a spot-up shooter. I want to send Bailey to a spot with a point guard that can feed him buckets. And so that's why Charlotte was my first spot. I just think with LaMelo, they could manufacture some really easy stuff, some highlight plays over the top with lobs and pick and rolls, or just as a straight up shooter. And I think that'd be a really, really fun young trio: Ace Bailey, Brandon Miller, and LaMelo Ball.
I would just be worried that all of a sudden his body would stop working and he'd only play 40 games a year.
Maybe.
That just seems to be the Charlotte curse, man. Mark Williams, LaMelo, now Brandon Miller.
Well, I was gonna mock Maluak there too to Charlotte, just because I think he could be what they think Mark Williams is. But
yeah, I mean, putting that sort of play finisher alongside LaMelo and then getting that sort of defensive anchor, like, it's a great fit. It is. It's just how often is LaMelo going to be on the court?
I'm worried. Tricky. I mean, I'm worried long term, man, with this new LaMelo's out again surgery.
It's not good.
Nope.
Not good. All right. Let's move on to answer L Nuts' question, who asks, how good are the Pistons actually, and what is their ceiling for the rest of the season?
Hopefully they stop duking it out MMA style. That was pretty wild. The Pistons and Timberwolves going at it.
That was insane. Isaiah Stewart has a bloodlust. All he wants to do is kill.
I like it.
Fight and destroy.
I kind of like it, man.
You like it? Did you see the video from like the fan angle in the crowd, like a couple rows back? Dude, did you see it? Because Isaiah Stewart has a terrifying look in his eye.
I mean, I like it because I want that guy on my team.
It surprises me that you like it, though, because he's an insane person.
Well, I don't want to play against him.
Nah, I mean, he's one of the great psychos.
Well, it's like, I think you need them. And I think Detroit's building that nasty enforcer brand up, man. I kind of like it for Detroit, so.
I mean, Malice in the Palace 2.0,
you need
they went into the crowd. Yeah. You do not see that very much at all.
You need that edge, man. I think Detroit's got it, and Ron Holland's a dog, too. Like, I think Detroit's going to push a team to 7 in the first round, but they could upset a team. I would probably pick them to lose, though. But I like a lot of what Detroit does. They win. They handle business now, and that's what I like about Detroit is they beat the teams they're supposed to. They don't let teams off the hook. They play really good defense. They hustle. They get out in transition. They play smart ball. They're a really good team. Like, just top to bottom. I really like the product that Detroit puts out. They've got young athletes everywhere. They've got shooting on the wings now. Detroit's really complete. So my prediction would be they push a team to 7 in the first round. They're a really feisty out. But I could see them somehow by the skin of their teeth getting into the second round. But I think that's a bit of a long shot.
Yeah, I would say that I basically think that's their ceiling. A team that could win a playoff series, but I wouldn't pick them to. In terms of answering how good are they actually, I'd say that they're about as good as their record. Like, I think that they maybe have a little bit of that young team record inflation of playing really hard, being consistently out to prove something on the defensive end in the regular season. But I do think that they're clearly a playoff caliber team. I mean, they're not some frauds. They're a legitimately good defense. But they are going to run into some issues in the playoffs with their offense, which I do think is very mediocre. And I think that they've done a nice job of putting professional basketball players alongside Cade, dramatically improving their spacing from last year, getting some actually make outside shots on the roster. But there's still a pretty major offensive burden on Cade. And I think that he is going to see some pretty crazy amounts of defensive attention in a playoff series. And I think that you're going to see him struggle some in terms of his efficiency. And I think the turnover numbers are going to be pretty high. And I just don't think that they have the creation and high-end offensive skill around him to really punish teams. So I can see the offense breaking down and getting pretty ugly in the playoffs. And that's why I would pick like Indiana to beat them pretty confidently. Again, I couldn't say that Detroit can't win that series, but Indiana is just an elite offensive team, and I'm going to bank on that over the gritty, defensive-minded team that I think can very much go through some lulls offensively. Levin asks, what team do you guys think would be the best landing spot for Book if he gets traded this offseason? Speaking
Carson
of
and
Detroit, that's
Yeah.
been strongly rumored.
Actually, that's ideal, honestly. I,
Yeah.
I don't feel like Detroit's got a ton of holes. I don't know what exactly the package would be that you'd have to give up to go get him, but I like that. I like Houston. I think Houston's got buku assets to throw at Phoenix if it's their first round picks, if it's young players. Um, and they've got a bunch of athletic wings around him. I just don't think Houston's that far away. That's really the team where I want D Book to get sent to a good situation that's complementary to his skill set, that really just needs that one guy that could put them over the top. So one in the West, one in the East. Houston and Detroit are probably my first two answers, actually.
Those are two good answers. Houston has always been super intuitive because they need that lead shot maker and shot creator, that really, really high-end offensive player in the half court who can take them up a level. I think that he's perfect in that sense. I think that he lines up with their timeline really nicely. And the best part of all is that if you're Phoenix, you get your draft picks back. So that's very clean. I do like Detroit a lot. I think that Jaden Ivey was playing some really good basketball before he went down, but I think putting that sort of elite off-ball scorer alongside Cade that Book is, like, now you're just talking about a very, very potent offensive backcourt. Those guys have the size. They have the athletic tools to be solid defensively. Book has had a down defensive season, but he can be capable there. I think Cade can be legitimately good there when he wants to be. And he's just a big talent upgrade. I mean, I do like Ivy a lot, but I would definitely be looking to acquire Book if I were Detroit. Because again, I mean, he's 28, so yeah, he's a little older than the cores of these very young teams, but not by much. Like, he lines up pretty nicely. And the last one that I would shout out is the Magic. That's been a standout destination for Book for the last 2 years in my eyes. I just think that that's another team that has a lot of the components in the place. They have a couple of really high-end young talents. They have the defensive identity. They just need that one real big-time offensive talent to take them up another level, and I think that Book would be a nice fit there. Again, he's just so portable offensively because he's such a great off-ball scorer. You really feel like he can fit anywhere, and he's such a good playmaker now, like, just a really, really nice offensive fit in a bunch of different situations for any of these younger teams that need that next guy to take them up a level. And I think that all these teams have legitimate assets that they can offer, but Houston has the best pool because they can give the Suns back their picks, because I don't know who else they would offer. I mean, Jalen Green probably is on the move in this deal just to make the contracts work because his big extension kicks in. And I mean, I think that that'd be a nice chip to add if you're Phoenix. Like, why not? I have my issues with Jalen Green, but he's a very talented young scorer. And if you can get him back with a couple of your own firsts, it's not bad. It's not bad for Book at all. And of course, I mean, just the fact that you're not just getting your own picks back. Now you're actually getting rewarded for sucking as opposed to just sucking and not even reaping the benefits of that through your own draft picks. Like, that's a big deal.
I'd see if I could get a few picks back in like a Reed Shepard, man. I think Reed would be like a good get back for D Book. Just, you know what I mean? Like,
right. They just have to take a big contract on.
Yeah.
Which I guess could be like Van Vliet, but I would rather take Jalen Green. But I do still like Reed. I think we'll learn a lot more about him in year 2. Bran asks, do you guys think the Hawks can become more than just a mid-team with Trae Young as the main option, or did they peak with the Eastern Conference Finals run?
I do think they peaked with the Eastern Conference Finals run. It just sucks. In an ideal situation, I really want to see Trae get paired up with somebody. And what I mean by that is get paired up with like an elite offensive player that can maximize him and Trae can maximize the other guy, like a Zion, right? If we could send Zion, if we could send Trae to New Orleans or something like that, we've always talked about that. We talked about for a long time before they got Fox, right? If it could be San Antonio.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to have another offensive guy that could help alleviate some of that burden off of Trae. Or the other guy that I would really like to see Trae get paired up with is like a defensive centerpiece, a one-man defense, like a Mobley or a Bam, for example, right? A guy that can – Trae is your centerpiece on offense, and then Bam is your centerpiece on defense. So until Atlanta gets that guy, I do think they're just kind of relegated to being an elite offense with a mediocre defense that just constantly does this balancing act where you feel like you're really close, but you're still really far away. And obviously, they got bit by the injury bug this year, too.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll be better next year with a healthy Jalen Johnson, with the improvement that we've gotten from Shai. But yeah, until they get the partner in crime for Trey, I do think they're kind of just stuck middling in the Eastern Conference.
I think that they do need that really high-end talent that you're talking about. And specifically, I want it to be an elite play finisher offensively, because I think that Trey can take on such a crazy load as a creator for you. He's just built to be that sort of ball-dominant, high-volume pick-and-roll, elite playmaker and volume scorer. Give him a big who is excellent off the roll. Give him an elite scoring wing who can be efficient with his touches, and then I think you'd take that leap. It's just that's easier said than done, and obviously their first attempt to add like a star alongside him went very poorly with DeJounte, who just wasn't as good as they thought, wasn't a good fit. That was bad on all fronts. I like a lot of the pieces that Atlanta I do. I mean, they're a very mediocre team on both sides of the ball this year, but they added a lot of young guys who are trending upwards. I'm a huge Jalen Johnson guy. I think that he can be an all-star in this league. Dyson Daniels, obviously, is one of the best defensive players on the planet and has been a solid offensive contributor this year. I've always liked Onyeka a lot. I do think realistically, like, it's probably most intuitive if you're thinking about the ideal pairing for a star with Trey, to look at a big who can be that high-impact defensive guy and who can be that high-impact pick-and-roll complement. So maybe you could upgrade Onyeka, but I definitely think he's a starting caliber center. And then Shai, we've been talking about. I mean, second half of the year has been shooting the ball so well. His off-ball feel is already so impressive. So, like, they've put together a nice group of wings alongside Trey. They just don't have that other cornerstone. I mean, Jalen Johnson is really, really good, but he's not the sort of guy who is propelling them into like Eastern Conference final sort of conversations, right? And I do think that it kind of sucks that they got off of both DeAndre Hunter and Bogey for returns that just weren't all that impressive at the deadline, because like in the short term, those are really good basketball players. I know that Bogey is older, but he's been so good for the Clippers as of late. DeAndre Hunter's just
Well, it's like, I mean, those guys have been like Terrence Mann and Niang have like played well for them and stuff like that, but it's like they're meaningless in the long term.
It's just not the same. Just not the same sort of upside as you're getting with those guys. Yeah, you've gotten production out of both those guys and LeVert, but I would have rather hold on to Hunter and Bogey for this team's ceiling. So I'm not super optimistic about the Hawks taking a big leap, especially because sometimes the curse of having a Trae Young is you're never really picking at the top of the lottery. And the Hawks don't have their own pick this year, right? I think that that's still going to the Spurs. But then I think after that, they do start having their own picks again. Speaking of having their own picks, Average Basketball Enjoyer asks, if you're the Sixers and the pick lands in the 4 to 6 range, do you package that pick with PG or Embiid and start to shift the team? What do you think, Logan?
I think I'd try.
Okay.
I'm just the only thing that's holding me up about this.
There is no try.
The only thing that's holding
Yoda from Star Wars. Have you seen it?
Great reference, bro.
Thanks, man. I try to keep my references pretty tight.
Your references are so tight.
Thanks, bro.
Your references are sick, bro.
By the way, the Hawks actually also send their 2027 first away to the Spurs, so they've got 2 more still going out to them. That DeJounte trade and the 2026 swap.
The thing that makes me think that Philadelphia really and truly is just screwed. They are just boned. Who wants Joel Embiid? Who wants Paul George? Like, these are like albatrosses of contracts, in my opinion, man. I don't know who is taking these guys on, even if you do package the pick. And I guess that's the incentive, right? Because I don't know. It's just hard for me to envision you getting adequate value back on the package. But I also don't want to use the pick and get a young player because he's not going to help me right now. So I don't know, man. The Sixers are between a rock and a hard place. Like, Part of me just says take the best player available, right? If it's an Ace Bailey or if it's a Derek Queen, and just hope that they pan out because you lucked out and you just have your pick. So that's what I'd probably recommend they do, because I just don't see them getting one. I don't know who wants Paul George, who is going to give you an asset that is even worth, right? Like, because when I look at you giving up PG and Embiid, to me, you're just sacrificing the pick to get off that money, and then it makes it kind of meaningless for you. So I'd say, actually, I'd probably just take the best player available and cross my fingers that those guys are healthy. There's not really a good answer to get out of the pickle that Philadelphia's in.
Yeah, man, I probably just would not give up such a great asset to get off of one of those contracts, even though it's ugly. It's ugly with PG because you are just starting a 4-year commitment of paying him north of $50 million each of these years, and we have no idea what Embiid. But I would, I guess, have to accept the reality that, like, we're going to have these two weird timelines going on concurrently with our roster, but I'd start developing that future timeline, which obviously Maxey is a part of, which, of course, Jared McCain is a part of, which, of course, this lottery pick this year in the top 6 would be a part of. Quentin Grimes, I think, has shown himself to be a good basketball player. He's not necessarily like a cornerstone. He's not, but he's a solid young player who's in that next timeline. And then I just think you have to live with the fact that it's like, we've invested in PG and Embiid, and yeah, these contracts are disasters, but we are going to have to give up too much just to get off of them to make it worth it. Because, like, you can try to free up yourself to start that next timeline by moving off of PG and Embiid, but if you have to give up the assets that would be your future, that would be that next timeline to do it, if you have to trade away a top 6 pick, then I don't think it's worth it. I understand they're in a weird spot. They're in basketball hell, but I would just say, give me the talent. Give me the best talent that I can get, and we'll unfortunately just have to live with this contract until we find some way to get off of it without giving up such a valuable future asset. Or maybe we just have to ride out the whole thing, and that sucks, but sometimes that's life in the NBA. Speaking of getting off contracts, Noah Turner asks, what do you think the Raptors should do with their current cap situation? Should they move on from one of the 3 big contracts or give it more time?
I don't know. I don't know what the Raptors are doing, man. I guess you just got to try it and ride it out and see what happens. I mean, that's the one thing with Toronto is I feel like you at least have to let the experiment run a little bit before you pull the plug, right? There's a reason you traded for Brandon Ingram. So, I don't know. Trot, IQ, RJ, Scotty, Ingram, it's going to be clunky. It's going to be weird. It's going to be janky. But the East isn't that competitive. And so you could at least be like a lock playoff team if this works out to a decent extent, where you're hovering around 500. You're a lock in that playoff to play in range. It's not ideal, but I think you got to give it a shot. You got to try it. I wouldn't be rushing to move off of anybody just yet, but the Toronto timeline doesn't really make sense to me. There's not really a direction. No. There's not really like a foundational building block that I believe in. Like, I know people like Scotty, but Scotty to me is so flawed offensively that I don't just ever see him being like an offensive number 1. I think he's a good connector. Like, I think he works in that way, but he's not a number 1 to me. BI is not a number 1 to me. RJ is not a number 1 to me. There's not a guy to me in Toronto, and that's what I feel like they still have yet to find. So I don't know. It's clunky. It's weird as hell. I wouldn't have traded for Ingram anyway. Yeah. But like I said, I think you got to try it. You got to give it a season to try out before you do anything drastic.
Yeah, they're obviously not going to move off of BI because they just traded for him and then they extended him. So I would probably try to sell high on RJ Barrett, even though he's the smallest of the contracts. Like, I just think he's the odd man out here, even though he's had a career season. I think that he's grown as a playmaker. He's been really impressive in terms of his ability to pressure the rim this year. But you've just put together this core with him and BI and Scotty of these guys who aren't very efficient scorers, want to have the ball in their hands a good bit, aren't volume 3-point shooters, and like with all of their weirdness, I don't think you can trot all three of them out there for a full season. So I would move off of RJ just because, like, as that sort of slasher, inconsistent, not super efficient shooter, he doesn't fit here, in my opinion. And I don't really like what Toronto's doing, but I guess I would feel better if they could move off of him and get some guys who fit better or some real draft capital or whatever. It's just too busy right now. Everything is too clunky and messy in Toronto, and I think that they need to do a little bit of cleaning up in terms of the guys who they're paying big money. Let's get on to some more historical NBA questions here, Logan, because we have a number of them. Huz Smokes Mid asks, I'm surprised I haven't heard you guys talk about this guy in any what-if scenarios. How high up the all-time rankings do you think Arvydas Sabonis could have been if he was allowed to play when he was originally drafted? To me, he was the Jokic before Jokic.
I look at it like the Pokemon evolution kind of deal. We always talk about it. You can't have Jokic before you have a guy like Arvydas. That's just the natural growth of these things. I think Arvydas would have been a really dominant big man. I think some of his abilities can kind of get overrated, I think, in hindsight. I think people apply these things that Jokic is elite at and just automatically pencil them in for Arvydas because that's what we do, but I don't think he was ever as dominant as Jokic. I think expecting him to be as great as Jokic was, it's just a little much for me. But he would have been dominant. I mean, you're looking at a guy who was 7'3", 280 pounds, and he came into the league and was great, and he didn't come in until he was after 30, right? He was a really productive big man when he was, but, we didn't get to see him in his prime. So, I don't know. I can't say he would have been a number one on a championship team. I can confidently say that. I think if he was going to win a title, I think it would have been as a 2 or as a 3 in that sort of role. But I think he would have been a really good big man. I think he top 100, top 75 maybe, I think is reasonable to think with a guy like Arvydas. I don't want to get too high, but
yeah,
that's about the range if he would have had an NBA career. I think 75 to 100 is reasonable.
I think that that's very reasonable, Logan, because I tend to agree with you. I think that sometimes people will act as though Sabonis to Jokic is like a 1-to-1 comparison, and it's just not. I mean, they obviously have their similarities, right? These massive passing bigs, European, but there's a lot of differences in there. Arvydas was a good shooter for his size. He was not the shooter that Jokic is. He also had very good touch. He does not have the unrivaled paint touch that Jokic has in the history of the game. He was also an inventive and crafty passing big, but his career assists per game average was 2 per game internationally, in Spain. So you just have to understand that what Jokic is doing as a passing hub is unlike anything that we've ever seen. He is doing things that partly you could say is just a product of time, right? The game evolving, as you said, sort of the Pokemon evolution of it, him running inverted pick and roll and being able to make all these reads. But I do just think he's also flat out the best post passer we've ever seen. I think that he's the best outlet passer that we've ever seen. I think that he is the best at spotting cutters that we've ever seen. If you're talking about the best passing bigs who predate Jokic even, I do think that a Bill Walton is clearly a better passing hub for you than Arvydas Sabonis. He's a very good passing big. He's not comparable to Jokic there. So I do think Jokic is the better scorer. I think that he is the better shooter by a good bit. I think that he is the better passer by a good bit. But Arvydas also much better rim protector. I mean, just such a massive man at 7'3", 280. So definitely the more imposing interior defender and shot blocker, and he also had very good hands defensively, so he does have an advantage there. I think that he would have been a really good offensive player and a better defensive player than Jokic, but I think that to put him and Jokic in the same breath, it's not totally accurate to me because Jokic is just that sort of one-of-one offensive talent in NBA history. I mean, he does several things that are just completely unique for a man of his size. And I do think it's important to note that, We often talk about Arvydas when he came over to the NBA as if he was like old and decrepit. And obviously he was 30 and he had already had a number of injuries and he was not at his absolute apex, but he was the 2-time reigning MVP of the Spanish league. Like he had just won back-to-back MVPs and had 2 of his most productive seasons. So you think about the player he was in the NBA when he did come over, and he was a good basketball player. And I think if he had come over earlier, absolutely he would have been a consistent all-star. And like you say, I think that expecting him to be around a top 100 player in NBA history is accurate. A guy who could have been all NBA, but was he going to be an MVP of the league? Was he going to be a top 15 player of all time like Jokic is? No, not in my opinion. Matt Boy asks, who are your guys' favorite obscure NBA and NFL players, past or present? A player you have no business enjoying so much, but you do anyways.
I wrote down 3 names just because I feel like I have an irrational affinity with all of these guys. Emmanuel Quickley is number 1 just because I've always been obsessed with his floater touch. He's one of my favorite NBA players. Like, it's art to me what he does with his left and right hand on that floater. I've never seen anything quite like it. Tim Tebow is another one I wrote down just because I still, to this day, even though I am deeply, deeply scarred from that playoff game where the 12-4 Steelers had to travel to the 8-8 AFC West champ Denver Broncos. Ryan Clark couldn't play. One pass, OT, TD to Demaryius Thomas. I'll never forget that, but I just always thought if somebody could have, and I know that it would have never worked. He was never going to be a star or anything like that. I just always wondered if a gimmicked up offense with Tebow would have worked because he could run the hell out of the ball. Like, his arm, the mechanics sucked. Like, he did not have an accurate arm whatsoever. But I always wondered if they gimmicked up an offense and let him have the reins, if he could have ran all over somebody. Because he was a good runner of the football. And then the third guy is just Duck Hodges, because I think it's so preposterous that a guy like Duck Hodges ever existed and won football games. Like, the fact that Tomlin went 500 with that dude is such a testament to Pittsburgh Steelers football and Coach T. So those are my picks, just a few of many.
Beautiful picks, Logan. You know, I'm thinking about this question, and I'm starting to wonder if I've gotten less whimsical about the game of basketball. I feel like if you asked me this question a couple years ago, I would have had a better answer. You know, there were certain guys who just had their specific traits that I fell in love with.
You want to go band for band with NBA weirdos right now? I mean, like, what about T.J. McConnell's, like
yeah,
paint, mid-range?
Yeah, you're right. I think that there are still those specific traits that really make me fall in love with guys. But I was thinking, like, a few years ago, a Ty Jerome I would have talked about. Now that's mainstream. Now he's on the Pick a Side podcast. Now everybody loves Ty Jerome. There's just a lot of role players who I really like in the NBA. Historically, I will say probably the funniest one is when I was a kid, Delonte West was legitimately one of my 3 favorite NBA players.
Virginia legend.
Tim Duncan and Lamar Odom, and I don't know why I liked Delonte West so much. I think everything was very arbitrary for me at that time, but I loved that guy. So Malik Monk has always been the one for me. Like, I just absolutely love, you just don't see that blend of athleticism and shooting and the playmaker that he's grown into. I feel like he's not obscure, but I guess it is a bit silly to like him that much. But, there were some guys, man, who I would romanticize back in the day.
Jeff Dalton
Christian
Jr.
Wood, and then you just see the flaws in some of these guys, and it's hard to ever be the same. It's hard to be as romantic about the game. Am I becoming robotic? Is it all about winning impact now, Logan? Can I not just appreciate a man with a beautiful floater like Rashawn Holmes? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Damn.
Why'd you have to get so deep and introspective, bro?
Damn, dude.
I think that is important.
Damn.
I mean, like,
That's
just some random
fucking dark.
just some random role players I bang with, like Santi Aldama. I do rock with Jeff Dalton Jr., bro.
That's a hilarious one.
That's such a deep cut. He also, if you have a floater, there's this nasty dude in the G League who has this weird hook shot. I think it's Xavier Simpson.
Yeah, Xavier Simpson.
Bruh. That always fires me up.
The successor to the great Wally Jones as a point guard shooting hooks.
Such a fun shot.
Yeah.
They're still out there, man. We can appreciate them.
No, I know. I guess maybe my standard of obscure is just kind of sick to the point where, like, I don't know. Thinking about some weirdos.
Dante Exum I rock with.
Yeah, Dante Exum's pretty fun. Dante Exum's fun. I like a big guard, Logan. I'm always a sucker for a big guard. All right, let's move on to this question from IMOBTW asks, of every decade, 1960s to 2020s, who are the most underappreciated NBA players? Name 3 for every decade.
Which way you want to start?
I don't know. Let's start with the 60s. Let's work our way forward.
I just wrote down 3 dudes. I mean, they're all bona fide legends, but I feel like they can get underrated sometimes. I wrote down Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, and Walt Frazier.
So this is a dude who said, I'm different than other guys. And then he said my favorite movies are Pulp Fiction, Scarface, Cock and Ball Torture 1, and Cock and Ball Torture 2.
Not all of us know Wilt Chamberlain's 14th teammate on the bench of 1963, all right?
Why not? See, here's the thing. I feel like people
are
going to be underwhelmed by my answer for the last question.
I should have said Clyde Lee and Neil
All-star.
Johnston and Pat Garrity.
Okay, there's a lot of range that you just covered there, but shout out to all of them. I can't help but notice that you only named White Slogan, so you're going to have to answer for that in the next life. Here are the 3 guys who I chose for the 60s. I am focusing on, like, star-level players. I presume that's who people want, I thought about the 70s, and I thought, do I want to shout out a Clifford Ray for being a bit ahead of his time as a passing hub as a big and being a very good defensive player? Do I want to shout out Mickey Johnson for being sort of the first point forward? And then I thought people aren't going to know who those guys really are, and that's not the intent of the question, probably. If it is, then I apologize, but I am going to talk about star-level guys. For the 60s, I chose Nate Thurmond, maybe the greatest post defender ever.
That's a good choice.
One of the greatest defensive anchors ever.
I wrote him down for the 70s, but yeah.
Sure, if you want washed Nate Thurmond with the Bulls and the Cavs, personally, I prefer
I just like that hairline.
Gnarly hairline. I mean, yeah, he comes in 64, so he was still very good into the early 70s. The Warriors were 395 and 362 with him in his career. They were 46 and 92 without him. That's impact, baby. That shows you the value of one of the greatest defensive players ever. Also, shout out to a guy who was his teammate for a time, Rick Barry. I was like, for the 60s and 70s, I think he deserves a shout, but one of the first great playmaking forwards and obviously a great scorer. And then I thought, let's give a shout out to Hal Greer. Hal Greer, who was such an excellent scorer, underrated playmaker, very solid efficiency, and very consistent for a decade. 70s, Logan. Give me 3 names. Give me 3 guys.
Well, I wrote down Thurmond, and then I wrote down Pistol Pete and Bill Walton. If Bill Walton's too mainstream, maybe we shout out Mo Stokes.
No. Well, Mo Stokes was 50s.
Mo Lucas. I meant Mo Lucas. My fault.
Oh, okay. Oh, I do love a Mo Lucas shout.
But, yeah, I think Pete can sometimes get overrated by certain people, but like just in terms of his overall winning impact, but ahead of his time, hell of a shooter, hell of a playmaker, one of the most creative passers of all time when he did pass, and then Bill, one of the highest peaks of all time. You got to respect it. So yeah, those are my picks for the 70s.
I have Bill down to, even though he is one of those all-time great peaks, just because he doesn't really get talked about that way that much. We actually answered a similar question to this in our last mailbag, so I'm just stealing the same names. Paul Westphal, great offensive engine, very efficient, underrated. Bobby Dandridge, great two-way wing, real winning impact guy, and that's how you end up being a key contributor on 2 different championship teams in the decade. How about the 80s, Logan?
I got 4.
Extra credit.
Dennis Johnson.
Good shout.
Shout out Bobby Jones, Andrew Toney, some Sixers love, and shout out Mark Price.
Ooh, phenomenal shouts. Okay, I actually had Mark Price down for the 90s here. I love the DJ shout, playoff riser, and phenomenal two-way guard. You said Bobby Jones. I think that's a great shout. One of the greatest defensive players ever. Such a versatile forward. Andrew Toney, absolute killer of a scorer when he was healthy. Just didn't have the longevity. I did consider another Celtic here. I have Kevin McHale down. I just think he was such a truly phenomenal player at his peak, and I think does get a little bit underrated. If you look at what he was doing in like the 85 to 88 playoffs, he was so damn good, even with the broken foot in 87, like still just absolutely balling out, giving you close to 25 a game on phenomenal efficiency, and he was a really good defensive player and rim protector, and up there for the best post bag of all time. It's him and Akeem in that top 2. And then Got to shout out Alex English, man. I mean, he is the leading scorer of the 1980s and was incredibly consistent and was a very solid playmaker as well. And the best player on a lot of really good, really fun offenses under Doug Moe especially. They played fast. They took care of the basketball. They moved the ball, but they were basically a walking top 5 offense for a while, and Alex English was the biggest contributor to that. How about the 90s, Logan?
I got Charles Barkley, one of his teammates, Kevin Johnson, and then I also wrote down Rod Strickland.
Ooh, a little Rod Strickland love. Rod Strickland, I feel like, does get mentioned whenever people talk about nastiest handles and nastiest finishing packages. That's when Rod Strickland comes up. But never an all-star, even though he was one-time All-NBA. I have Reggie Miller down here, even though he is one of those guys who is an iconic player of the 90s. I still think that he's underappreciated just because the raw box score and his accolades do not fully capture his insane offensive value as one of the most efficient scorers ever, one of the greatest shooters ever, got to the line at such a great rate, and is, in my opinion, the greatest pure off-ball mover that we've ever seen. So the Pacers were an automatic top 10 offense in the 90s. That's because of Reggie Miller. I also had Mark Price down for the 90s. I had Kevin Johnson down, even though not a good guy. I mean, he was a phenomenal downhill threat and playmaker and just a really good athlete and an elite point guard at his peak. And then I have Alonzo Mourning down here because I do think that he kind of gets lost in this generation of great rim protectors and really is one of the best defensive players of all time and was top 3 in MVP voting in back-to-back years. And for a guy of that caliber, just doesn't get talked about quite as much as maybe you would think. How about the 2000s?
I wrote down Chauncey Billups, Sean Marion, and Chris Webber.
I have Sean Marion down here as well. Just a hyper-versatile wing. The best defender to never be all defense, I would say Sean Marion is. And a really good offensive player as well. Did you have somebody else you wanted to shout out there?
Nah, just he was never first team all defense, or he was never on an all defense team, period.
Never all defense, brother.
That don't make sense, bro.
Crazy. It really doesn't. It really doesn't. Just a rare level of rim protection from a wing and such a versatile defensive player as well. I have, similar to Reggie Miller, Ray Allen here. What he was doing with the Bucks and the Sonics, consistently leading out elite team offense, one of the greatest shooters of all time, and that's just such a valuable trait to have. It's such a special trait when you can stress defenses like that, and he was very efficient as well, not Reggie level, but still great. I also have Steve Nash here. I mean, he is one of those great players, but just the way that people talk about his MVPs in 2005 and 2006, they really underappreciate the all-time great efficiency, the all-time great playmaking, the all-time great shooting, and the fact that a number of the greatest offenses in NBA history were led by Steve Nash, and the greatest offensive decade in NBA history arguably was led by Steve Nash across both Dallas and Phoenix. He's the greatest pick-and-roll operator ever, one of the best ever at pushing pace, and I'm just so high on his offense. I do think that he's among the greatest that we've ever seen on that side of the ball. Then I have a couple more shout-outs. Peja Stojakovic, I think very ahead of his time as that sort of jumbo-sized elite shooting wing. Obviously, top 5 in MVP voting in the 2004 season. That's rare. That gets kind of overshadowed. And then AK-47, I think very much ahead of his time with his defensive versatility, which was so special, with his offensive skill, his handle, and his passing at his size. I think he's a guy who, if you dropped him a decade later and you really emphasized the three-point shot, would have been an absolute monster, but he already was. I think his peak's just underrated. Like, his on-off numbers are insane. The Jazz basically went from being like a playoff caliber team to the worst team in basketball with him and his 3-year peak. And that's reflective of the two-way value that he had. 2010s, Logan. Give me some.
I've got Blake Griffin, Andre Iguodala, and LaMarcus Aldridge.
Ooh, I like them. There were two that really jumped out to me here. Chris Paul, I think, still doesn't get fully appreciated for being such an elite offensive engine, such just a paragon of consistency and a really good defensive guard as well, and had such an elite impact on winning everywhere, actually got better in the playoffs, and still has been the butt of many mean-spirited jokes, Logan. I don't like how CP3 gets talked about all the time. I know. He's Rondo, CP0 rings. Fuck you. And then I have Dre here. Dre, to me, is like one of the easiest choices on this list. I just think defensive greats often get underappreciated because the box score doesn't speak to their value, and he is like the epitome of that. So I didn't write down anybody for the 2020s just because that's right now, but do you have anybody down here?
I didn't write down any stars. I wrote down role players that I still think might be underrated. Well, a couple of stars. One at least. I wrote
Evan
down
Mobley, Chet Holmgren.
I wrote down Siakam just because I don't know if Siakam gets fully appreciated. He's so good offensively. He's so reliable night to night with what he does. I still really like Siakam. I got Big Zoo written down just because I don't know if he's still fully appreciated. And then two guards who I think get their flowers, but I really like them. Andrew Nembhard for the Pacers, I think, is just really solid, really well-rounded. Like, I would just want him in my rotation. And then I should have had this guy down for the question earlier about just guys that you irrationally like. Kayson Wallace, I think, is underrated, and I also just love, like, and the reason I write down Kayson is just because I was so convinced that he was going to be a high-impact winning player when he got to the league, and then it's exactly what he has done. Like, his instincts just jumped off the film at you in college, like his feel for the game, and I think that's been directly translated. So I really like Kayson, but I didn't write down any like big time stars here.
I love Queso as well. I think he's going to make a real case for being all defense this year. I don't know if he'll get it, but he at least belongs in the conversations. I will shout out some stars here who come to mind. You mentioned two Pacers and you didn't bring up Tyrese Halliburton. I think Hallie's still the most
I don't
underrated.
mention guys that I guess I just don't mention guys
I'm just
that, like,
applying
I
the same criteria.
You know, like I appreciate Hallie. I've always appreciated Hallie, so.
Right, but the world doesn't, and that's
that's because they're stupid and homophobic.
Real. I think that Hallie is kind of a lock, honestly, because he's another guy who the box score sells short, but such a brilliant, crazy efficient offensive player.
I heard a crazy stat the other day.
Offense. Yeah.
I think he's at like 9 assists per game to 1 turnover per game since the All-Star break, bruh.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to set the record for fewest turnovers with 9+ assists per game in a season. He's unreal, and he's been 65% true shooting since the first 15 games of the season.
Talk to him.
And then I feel like, it's the same guys I always say are underrated. KP, I think, has such an elite combination of the most valuable traits for a big with post-scoring, floor spacing, rim protection. And I'll shout out Evan Mobley here. That's my guy. That's my beloved. And I hope that someday we get to share a moment together. And I'll leave it at that.
Come on, man.
What? I just want to shake his hand and tell him how much I appreciate his game.
Keep it pushing.
200 Proof Sports asks, if Chris Middleton doesn't get hurt in 2022, the Bucks go on to win the finals over Golden State. Do we have Giannis over Steph all time? Same MVPs, a DPOY, and presumably 2 finals MVPs to 0. 3 rings to 2 for Steph, but Giannis with way less help?
All right, hypothetically, if I was 6'6" and like really good at basketball, I could be in the NBA. That's just kind of where I come down on this. I mean, I guess it would be a conversation if Giannis and the Bucks won in 2022, but they didn't, and Steph, I think, slammed the door and kind of reinforced a lot of things about him. I think the 2022 championship is one of the most important to Steph's legacy as a basketball player, doing it pre-KD, doing it with KD, and doing it post-KD. I just think puts a nice bow on everything where he doesn't leave anything to chance. There's no doubt. Maybe we would. I don't know, but I think even if that had happened, I think I'd probably still have Steph above Giannis. The accolades thing doesn't matter to me. Steph has a Finals MVP. It's Andre Iguodala's. Steph, actually got his Finals MVP in 2022.
No, I know what
so
you mean, though.
Yeah, but no, it doesn't. It wouldn't make that big a difference to me, I don't think.
Yeah, I just think that there's a lot of leaps in terms of assumptions here. Like, I wouldn't pick the 2022 Bucks even with Chris Middleton to beat the Warriors. I think that Drew was way too inconsistent offensively at that point. And I think that the Bucks' entire playoff offenses for years, struggled. Even in the title run, they weren't a good playoff offense. They were just good enough, and that defense was so great. But I think that in terms of a specific matchup, Brook would have been very difficult to play in that series. I think that Steph was at such a special offensive level. So, I probably would have picked the Warriors to win that series. And then these things don't affect my all-time rankings as much as other people's. Like you said it, I don't value accolades because Steph Curry has been the best player on 4 championship teams. He has 1 Finals MVP, but he's been the best player on 4 championship teams. That's what matters to me. And like these specific breaks that can happen aren't as significant to me as just how much do I value you as a basketball player at your peak. And I think that Steph's skill set to me at his absolute best is something that I prefer to Giannis's. I have Steph's peak higher all time because I think that he makes a legitimate case for being the best offensive player ever. I take Jokic, obviously, but I totally hear the Steph case. I think that he is the best offensive ceiling raiser ever. He is one of the on-off GOATs, and the reason for that is that he has like one of the largest offensive impacts that we've ever seen. And I do prefer that to Giannis being such a great two-way player, but also being, at this time in 2021 and 2022, not the offensive player that he is today, even though he had a great series against Boston. And I do think was so impressive what he did as a playmaker and with his volume as a scorer against the defense that was all keyed in on him. I still prefer Steph being one of the offensive GOATs. And so, no, this wouldn't change anything for me, really. Sydney Duke asks my favorite question maybe on this list because it's just kind of out of left field. Who's better, 2018 Oladipo or peak Jaylen Brown?
I'd take peak Jaylen. I'd take peak Jaylen Brown. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just because we didn't get to see it as long too. But like, I think Jaylen Brown can kind of get underrated sometimes too. I don't think he can get underrated by some people, overrated by others. Like, I guess I'd probably still prefer Oladipo's offense like alone compared to JB like that. But Jaylen Brown's one of the best defenders on planet Earth. He's one hell of an athlete. I think he's one of the best transition scorers in the league. Like,
you almost broke some news right there about Jaylen. Wow.
I don't know. I think I'd still take Jaylen Brown, but I can see an offensive case for VO. And maybe it's because it was so short-lived with VO, but I think I prefer JB.
If we're taking single-season peaks, give me Ola Threepo, man. Give me Kahinde Babatunde Victor Oladipo, one of the all-time great NBA names. I mean, he was just a problem, man. He had a really good shooting season, and I do think was a significantly better playmaker. Gave you 23, 5, and 4 on plus 2% true shooting, plus 14 on off differential for a 48-win team. Like, the ability to actually be that sort of number one and take a team to the playoffs, it's a valuable thing. I would not be confident in Jaylen doing that with his efficiency issues as a scorer, with his passing issues, with his ball handling issues. Like, Oladipo just had such special quickness with the ball, and then he could also really dice you up as a pull-up shooter at this time, and was also an excellent defender. Like, I can't say that I would take Jaylen Brown over 2018 Victor Oladipo defensively. I think that Jaylen is an excellent on-ball defender. I think that he has an edge there because of his versatility, because he can certainly handle bigger matchups than Victor. I also think that Jaylen Brown is a very, very off-ball player and defensively and team defender, and I would give Oladipo an edge there as being a bit more disruptive and underrated shot blocking guard at his peak, led the league in steals that year. So I would give it to Oladipo. I think he was awesome, super efficient out of pick and roll, isolation, all the on-ball play types, and doing it in a very different situation where he was asked to do more with less talent around him. Last straight up NBA question. This episode may go, I don't know how long, Logan, 4 hours, but I've still got juice. And we're trying to get to as many of your guys' questions as we can. So we want to show you guys how much we love you and how much we appreciate you. FTW Karma asks, what would your guys' best guess be for the next major evolution of the game, similar to the three-point revolution, if there could even be one?
Yeah, I think we're due for one, and I think it's an extension of the three-point evolution. I would just call it the skills evolution. I think we're going to get to a point in the NBA where everybody on the court is uber talented. Everybody can shoot. Everybody can put the ball on the floor. Everybody can attack closeouts. Everybody can play make. Everybody can do everything. Everybody can defend. And also, along with this, is everybody's jumbo sized. Everybody's 6'5" and 180 pounds plus. Like, I think that's what we're getting. Like, the league is just so talented. The stock is only getting better. Like, the players that are coming up are only getting more and more talented. Like, I think that's the next evolution. Bigger guys who are just more skilled, and nobody has any holes in their game. Personally, I'm super excited for it, and I think we're on the cusp of that kind of boom. I'm really excited.
Yeah. I tend to agree. I don't know that you can replicate the three-point revolution just because it was such a unique thing in that there was this extremely valuable shot that was being so drastically underutilized. And once you figure that out, like, offensive efficiency is just going to boom in so many different ways for so many different reasons, because you're taking more valuable shots in a vacuum, but because you're improving spacing so much. And now that there's this expectation that you can shoot threes, younger players start developing that, and more guys are coming into the league capable of shooting. And like, that's such a crazy transformation that the NBA has taken over the last decade plus. I don't know if there's anything that can ever be figured out in that same way, but the game is obviously going to continue to evolve. I think, just like you said, Logan, athletes are just going to keep getting bigger, more athletic, and more skilled. And this evolution to the place where, like, so many players are capable of putting the ball on the floor and knocking down shots and passing that we have today, like, that's just going to continue to become even more and more the case.
I was just going to add, I mean, I've even seen the Steph Curry effect, and I think if you play pickup basketball, you've noticed it. It's just like I'm saying, not even on an NBA scale, just like a pickup scale. Like, you have to respect players' shots more. You have to defend. Everybody can shoot threes now. It's equalized the game in a way that I think is really healthy for the sport, and it's optimized the sport in a lot of ways. I know people are critical of it. I think it's an improvement, and I think it's, I don't know, you're seeing it across basketball, not just in the NBA.
I think a lot of what's going to be interesting about this next era in the NBA is going to be defenses continuing to try to find counters to this offensive explosion, which I do think we've already seen progress this year. And there's a lot of interesting stuff happening, right? You have teams prioritizing speed more than ever before defensively. You have teams mixing in zones more than ever before defensively. Zone defense wasn't legal in the NBA until 2002. And now you have a number of defenses, the Heat, the Cavs, the Thunder, who implement it in some really interesting ways and can try to throw a wrench into an offense for stretches. So it's just going to be a league of aliens, that's for sure. But there's always going to be that push and pull between offense and defense trying to find answers. And I don't think that this is just like an exponential upwards trajectory of offense. And sometimes you think like something is a permanent change in the game, right? Like pick and roll volume just went crazy in the 2010s and reached this incredibly high point in terms of volume. And then it stayed put for a few years and has actually even gone down slightly.
Well, it's like read option when the read option took over, or if it was Wildcat, or if it's the RPOs that are taking over. You know, I think ebbs and flows is the right word. We're going to see stuff come back into style, stuff go out.
And now there's still a ton of pick and roll, but now some of those pick and rolls are supplemented by handoffs more than we've seen before, right? Where it's like, hey, we can get this guy a running start into a pick and roll action. There's so many little things that are constantly changing about the game, and that's going to remain the case. But do I think there is an equivalent to the three-point evolution coming on the horizon? No, I don't, because I honestly don't think there is an equivalent in all of NBA history. Like, there isn't really a comparable explosion in terms of offensive efficiency to what we've seen in the last decade plus. The closest would be coming out of the 70s, what you get in the 80s, offense taking a huge step forward. But it's a crazy thing. It's a crazy thing what happened with the game of basketball with the three-point revolution. And yeah, I do think that it's kind of one of one. But the game's going to keep changing. That is for sure. Let's be real. 2025's been all about change. Whether it's work, personal stuff, or just the daily grind, it can be hard to keep up. But here's the deal. When things get hectic, we don't have to go through it alone. Embrace the power of nature and elevate your everyday with Via. Trusted by over 500,000 happy customers, Via is the Swiss Army knife of wellness, dedicated to harnessing the natural benefits of hemp to create high-quality wellness products. Whether you're looking to improve your sleep, focus, recovery, add a little pep to your step, or just get high, Via has something for you. With products ranging from 0 to 100 milligrams of THC, Via gives you the power to blaze your own trail.
Via is well renowned for their award-winning THC and THC-free gummies, THCA flower, soothing topicals, and calming drops, all crafted with the highest quality hemp sourced from trusted, independently owned American farms. And the best part, Via legally ships to nearly all states in the U.S. in discreet packaging directly to your door with a worry-free guarantee, no medical card required. So if you're 21 plus, check out our link to Via's website link in our description and use code NERDSESH for 15% off and free shipping on orders over $100. And if you're new to Via, get a free gift of your choice.
Via really is just the best, man. They've got whatever you need, whatever mood, whatever vibe you're feeling, they've got you covered. Personally, I'm a huge fan of Cloud9, but it's all good stuff. And by the way, the gummies are legitimately delicious. You're going to have to hold yourself back from taking too many just because you're going to want a little bit more of that sweet, sweet flavor. So we can't recommend it highly enough. Quality ingredients, affordable, accessible. Check out Via.
If you're 21 plus, check out the link to Via in our description and use code NERDSESH to receive 15% off, free shipping on orders over $100, and if you're new to Via, get a free gift of your choice. After your purchase, they ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Enhance your everyday with Via.
Let's get a few NFL questions, then we'll get to the miscellaneous stuff. CJ asks, what non-playoff team from this NFL season do you think has the brightest future, and which playoff team has the grimmest future? I like this question, Logan. Let's start with which non-playoff team has the brightest future.
I've got three that I chose. The first one that comes to mind is the Bears, just because it seems like such a logical step that they're going to take a step forward next season. If that's playoffs or if that's to be just outside of the playoffs. They've got Caleb Williams. They've got the young franchise quarterback. They've got the talent on the outside. They improved the offensive line. The defense wasn't bad at all last season. Like, they just seem like such a no-brainer to a team that's building to something, you know, and that the reason I don't put them as a playoff lock is just because of how difficult the NFC North is as a division. I couldn't pencil in anybody from there. Right, Detroit suffers a major injury. Maybe they go from 15 wins to, you know, out. It's such a tough division, and football is always a sport that you feel like one thing changing could change everything. So I'm not confident in saying that they're going to be a playoff lock, but I'm very confident in saying that their future is very, very bright, and they're going to improve next year.
I like the Bears as a shout a lot. I have them down as well. I just still very much believe in Caleb being a special talent athletically in terms of the arm. He's got it all. Just needs to speed up a bit in terms of his processing of the game. Like to see him be a little bit more accurate, but you give him the line. I think the weapons are there. The coach now is such a huge factor here. I do believe in Ben Johnson a lot, and we've already seen the Bears put forth a very solid defense last year. I think they're putting Caleb in a much better position to succeed now. And I would shout out another very, very talented rookie quarterback this past year in his situation that I think improved a lot this offseason, and that's the New England Patriots with Drake May. I do think that similarly, I mean, I just have so much faith in the young quarterback. I think he's going to be a superstar. That's a big part of it. I'm not the highest on the Vrabel hiring, but I do think that he's a good culture guy. I think he's a stabilizing force, and I just think they added a lot of talent. They were very, very active in free agency, and so I think that they're going to take a pretty sizable leap this next year, and I think that'll be the start of an upward trajectory because I think Drake is one of those guys.
Yeah, I think the Patriots are a good one. The only other one I wrote down was Cincinnati, and that's just because they've got Burrow. They're going to bring back Chase and Higgins. Like, I get that they need to retool basically the entire defense, but that is my foundation is pretty ideal. That offense isn't going anywhere.
I don't think that they were wise to pay T that much, though. I just think Bengals fans love talking about Burrow's production with Jamar without T, and it's still very good production. Like, why not just invest elsewhere? My belief is that if you have a quarterback who is that elite, who you're paying that much, you can give him one elite weapon. He shouldn't need two. He should be able to elevate the rest of the offense, and then you can invest elsewhere. So I think T is great. I just don't know about paying three players all on the offense, that kind of insane money. How about the grimmest future for a team that was in the playoffs, Logan?
I actually don't think there's a good answer for this question, but if I had to pick a team, it would probably be the Steelers. And I think they're a pretty obvious choice for this just because of the trajectory that the Steelers have been on. Denver is ascending. You know, they were toiling away for a while. They're ascending now. The Chargers, toiling away, are now ascending. The Texans, toiling away, are ascending. So you look at the other teams. The Bills aren't going anywhere. The Ravens aren't going anywhere. The Chiefs aren't going anywhere. And the NFC, a lot of the same things apply. Teams that have been kind of stuck. The Steelers have been doing the same thing over and over again for almost a decade now. And post Big Ben, they still don't have the answer to the biggest question, which is still the quarterback position. It is why I'm not optimistic about the future. And if you asked me to look into my crystal ball, they're not going to have the quarterback sorted next year, right? The guy that they get this year is probably going to be a one-year guy. They're probably going to win 10 or 11 games. They're probably going to be a wild card team that gets bounced in the first round. So we're going to be the exact same spot that we were last year, that we were in the year before that we were in the year before that. There's not enough changing about the situation for me to be optimistic. Now, there are some things that could encourage me about the year after that, like if DK and George have a good year, if the offensive line takes a meaningful leap, if I have more confidence in Arthur Smith as an offensive coordinator, that could be a differentiator in me. But until the Steelers make a big change offensively that I'm really confident in, getting the offensive coordinator or getting the quarterback, they're going to be the answer for this question, in my opinion.
I have the Steelers as well. I feel like you basically said it all. They are just in the same spot that they've been in for a half decade, and that's not going to change until and actually, some big changes.
I was going to say, I didn't put the nail in the coffin here. The reason that it's so damning is because if they don't get the quarterback or they don't get the offensive coordinator, eventually the outside noise is going to get too large, and the Steelers are going to have to chop the head off the snake and fire Mike Tomlin. I don't want that to happen. I love Coach T. Let me be clear about that. I think he is a phenomenal football coach, but there's just going to come a point where if we're still here in 2 years, if we're still here in 3 years, that's when I think the Steelers organization is just going to have to bite the bullet.
I agree. Daniel Olson asks, what's your prediction for how many wins the Vikings will have?
I'm going to say 9.
Oh.
Tough division. I know that people are probably going to be, they won 14 last year. Super tough division. The Lions aren't, the Lions will probably take a little bit of a step back, but they're not going to fall off a cliff. The Packers aren't going anywhere. The Bears have gotten a lot better. And the reality of the situation, guys, as good as the Vikings situation is, as good as the team is, this is a rookie quarterback. And so, you can tell me about Jefferson. You can tell me about Aaron Jones, the elite offensive line. I like a lot of things about the Minnesota Vikings, but you're going to have a rookie quarterback in. And so that changes things to me. It's like you can't take Sam Darnold for granted. Was he elite? No. Was he better than a traditional rookie quarterback? Obviously.
Yeah.
I just think there's going to be some natural growing pains with the first year of J.J. McCarthy where it's really hard for me to envision this team winning close to what they won last year. Are they going to be in the playoff picture? Yes. Are they going to be in the playoffs? I can't say for certain. So I'm confident in saying 9 to 10 right now.
Yeah, I would say 9 to 10 as well. It is a tough schedule for them. Obviously, the division is absolutely brutal, but outside the division, you have to see the Eagles, Commanders, Ravens, Bengals, Falcons, solid teams. Cowboys will be better next year. Steelers, Chargers. Not a lot of gimmies on the schedule. And I do have some real questions about how effective J.J. McCarthy is going to be. Now, I think he'll be capable. I think that's just what this system and this situation does when you have this sort of offensive talent and you have an offensive play caller like KOC. He's going to be in a very good position. And I like what they did defensively. I mean, I think that they got even more talented on that side of the ball this free agency. I'm going to say 10 because I think that they're so talented. But the schedule and having to rely on a rookie quarterback, those are a couple of tricky factors for them. Max asks, if you were Sean McDermott, what's one thing you do what's one thing you do differently to help this team get over the hump? Go MF Bills. Hell yeah, brother.
I'd fire myself.
Oh, Logan Camden from the top rope. I'd probably stop bringing up 9/11 so much, and then I'd fire myself. No, I would just say be more flexible defensively. And listen, I've talked about this, but in the Chiefs game this past year, tried to do it at least with playing more man, and then just lost Benford, and that was pretty messed up, man. But I think that there are certain things that it's like, I wish that McDermott was better with timeouts. Well, that's not going to change. He can't just magically do that. I would just say be more aggressive, be more flexible defensively, which I do think trended in the right direction this past year. But it's ultimately going to come down to what the players on the field can do, I think. And specifically the defense. And part of that is going to be McDermott's play calling. Part of that is also going to be bringing in a Joey Bosa. What difference can he make? McDermott and, of course, Bobby Babbage handling defensive responsibilities, what they do. Enough about all these sports, Logan. Let's just see what wacky questions the people have for us in this miscellaneous category. We're starting off with DJ. Have you ever thought about streaming yourselves watching the games on playback? I will say I have, and we might do that at some point. I think that'd be fun.
I think
I got to look into it.
I think it'd be a lot of fun. I'm worried about my internet holding up throughout the entire time, but I mean, outside of that,
because you live in a shed in my basement.
Yeah.
Chained up. Yeah. So that can obviously be a problem. But no, I mean, we might do that. But of course, if you guys don't know the playoff routine, we are going to be live after the games every night, basically, in the playoffs. That's how we do things around here. So that'll be fun. David asks, what's your favorite rap lyric that references an NBA player? That's a good question.
It is a good question. There's a bunch I like. Pump It Up Freestyle is basically all NBA lyrics by Jay-Z. I mean, he shouts out Sean Bradley, Harold Miner, J.R. Ryder. Like, there's a bunch of guys that he
Don't
drops
forget the
in that
best one. Purvis Ellison, but he doesn't even dignify him with his full name. He just calls him Purvis Ellis, you worthless fella.
Exactly.
That's a great bar.
The game's got a lot of good ones that I like. Money, I ball like Tony Parker do it. I speak no English, but De Niro, I talk it fluent. I want to.
What about Tony Parker's bars from Balance Trois? Have you heard that tune?
I forgot about that one.
Tony Parker's hit 2004 album.
Game's got another one. Posted on the block with a Shaq like Yao Ming. Babyface Ray has a wild one. I remember I was listening to a song and he name dropped Kay Felder one time. That was diabolical. And then this isn't an NBA player, but Action Bronson's got a funny one on a song with Mac Miller where he's like, I fixed the game between Kentucky and Miami of Ohio. Just such random colleges. But there's a bunch. I think it enhances, man. Anytime I hear an NBA or a sports reference in a song, it kind of fires me up.
Yeah, you're probably the fakest dude I've ever met because you didn't mention a single one of my bars, and I'm probably never going to forgive you for that. Greg Oden, your career was stolen by your knees. God, please give him another chance to prance around, man. He was so gifted. When he was healthy, the Blazers stayed winning. Or how about this? And speaking of hooks, mine look just like Kareem. Me and my boy Benno Udrih made the city of cream. I float like Rashawn Holmes, carry my team like Akeem. Make your girl's legs shake, 'cause I'm a real-life dream. You didn't listen to any of my songs? You didn't listen to any of my raps that I wrote? This is why you can't trust men, bro. This is why you can't trust men in 2025. Sad. Vin asks, have you guys explored each other's bodies? When will you guys explore each other's bodies? Is there footage? Can we see it? Link.
I plead the fifth.
Logan.
I plead the fifth.
You're a podcaster. You don't have that right. Your job is to talk.
I plead the fifth.
Yes. Tomorrow. Yes. Yes. Link in bio. Those are my answers to the questions. Gavin says, can we get more Trivia Gauntlet with PTG? Need that more than anything.
God, I hope so.
Yeah, shout out, man. Shout out. I was just thinking about that the other day when Logan and I were going head-to-head on the Trivia Gauntlet hosted by the great Peyton T. Gallagher. But Peyton T. Gallagher then got himself a full-time job that takes a lot of his time, so I don't know. Maybe we can try to find a way to run that back in the summer, because I do really like when we get to go head-to-head. It's fun. And Logan, how many times did you beat me in that?
They took away my only dub because the shit's rigged.
I think it was, what, 8-0 for Big Cars? Something like that?
I'm not going to say that because my mom would be disappointed if I said that.
You want to explore my body?
I'm going to mute myself.
Dude, you can't do that on a podcast, especially when this question is specifically
Look, man,
for
I ain't
you.
going to say nothing nice, all right?
Nick wants to know, Logan, 5 LeBrons
You
in
need
one room
Jesus, Nick.
are
You need
like
Jesus.
all
Go
5
to the church
or
and
just
pray.
one?
Go to church and pray, please.
Well, that's not a very good answer.
Y'all need Jesus.
Did you hear me? 5 LeBrons, 1 room. Are you letting all 5 hit or just one?
I'm just blinking because this is a podcast. I'm just blinking. I ain't got no answer for that. Y'all need Jesus, man. How many?
I don't like you imposing your religion on
Right
all
back
of our
at you, bro.
viewers,
Right
Logan.
back at you.
The question was specifically for you.
No, it's not.
All right, this one's specifically for me. Adongus wants to know, does Carson use Logan's head as a pumice stone for his big hairy feet? So I didn't know what a pumice stone was when I read this, so I thought, no, I don't do that. But then when I looked it up, yes, I use Logan's head to remove dead skin from my big hairy feet. I use it as a nice smooth surface to run against my feet and remove dead skin. So yes, very intuitive, Adongus. Sort of related with that, the face of the internet. This is literally the face of the internet asking this, Logan. Why bald?
You know, I feel like I get a question like this on every single mailbag.
Yeah.
Because I shave my head.
And why bald?
So originally, I tell this story sometimes. I went bald one time because I tried to get Carson to give me a fade. I didn't want to pay $40 at the barbershop to go get a fade.
I said, you want me to run your fade? I'd never do that to my friend.
So Carson gave me a fade.
I put him in the hospital.
It was the worst
Cracked his
fade.
skull open. They had to shave his head. That's why he's bald.
It's the worst fade of all time. I had to go bald after
Subjective.
that. After that, I realized I had what is known as male pattern baldness, and I just decided instead of waiting until my hairline retreats, I'm just gonna let go. I'm just gonna let it go right now and go bald. And so yeah, I'm
so
bald.
empowering. I think you're such a fucking hero, Logan. You know that?
I'm just
admire you
bald.
so
I'm
much.
not doing anything heroic. I just don't have hair, man.
Every day
I let
look
that
at
shit
you
go,
and you just
bro.
move me. 4 or 5 times a day I look at you and I almost cry. I'm so proud of you and I just feel so goddamn lucky to know you. I mean, you just are a fucking hero, man.
I love you, Carson.
Is there anything you can't do? Okay, I don't know how to tell this to you, but there's another question about your baldness. Will Hardley asks, if Logan could get a hair transplant from Carson's head, would he?
No, I'm proud of this thing, man.
I would do that for you, Logan.
I appreciate
Probably not from
I
my head.
appreciate
I'd
that.
probably donate hair from somewhere else. Wink, wink. Wink like my balls.
that.
Could you imagine?
Yeah, I'd probably tape those on my face. I give myself a nice beard.
I've always wanted us to be so close, Logan, that we could share part of each other's bodies.
Wow, that's something.
Just figure we might as well put it all out
That's
there.
something, man.
Okay, last question. Warriors asks, Carson, what's your favorite flavor of bubble bath? Cordially, me. That's such a good question. I don't know. When was the last time I had a good bubble bath? Logan, when was the last time you bathed me?
I bathed Juju earlier today.
2-3 days ago, you gave me a bubble bath. What was that flavor?
Sponge bath, actually.
That was a sponge bath, actually. That's more intimate, and that's how I prefer it. So, yeah, I guess I'll take a sponge bath if you have one. Thanks for asking. We did have a few people ask if we could do an all-time NBA draft, and the answer is absolutely we will do that this summer. We'll get some of our buddies on. We'll have 4 or 5 different people drafting. We'll go 10 rounds, maybe 12.
Fire me up. We'll get the full roster.
It'll be just like when TNT did and Allen Iverson went first overall.
That's so dumb.
Yeah, that's the curse of
We
picking
should-
first. You
We
have
should
to
run
take
it.
AI.
We should run it in like 2K or something, and I'll dust all y'all.
Nope. Doubt it.
I'm cooking, bro.
You haven't picked a team.
Just wait. It don't matter.
Have we ever done an all-time draft that you won when we simulate it? Last
No,
time
because
took
I
you.
didn't get to play, man. I need to play, bro.
Oh, no, that's not the point. The point isn't about your 2K skills, bro. The point is about how good of a team you pick.
Man, I think you sound scared, bro. You gonna get this work.
Why would I be scared of somebody who's never beaten me in one of these drafts?
But man, it's because the man is
But-
simulating
but-
it, bro.
but-
We're not
Yeah.
actually playing it, bro. I'd cook.
No,
I'd
it's
cook.
true. I got a little guy pulling the strings on all
No,
these
dude.
simulations.
Our first draft, I'll never forget, bro, with you and Gabe, was the worst I've ever done in one of these. I sold so hard in that draft.
It's all right, dude. It's all right. As long
That's not
as,
happening again. I'm winning this year.
as long as you don't take Arnaldus Kulboka, you'll probably be fine.
I'm gonna take Ignas Brazdeikis, man.
Dude, please don't take Ray Spalding. if you take Ray Spalding or if you take Kevin Hervey, first overall, I'm walking
I'm going
out.
to take Wade Baldwin and James Ennis the third.
Fuck, okay. James Ennis the third is kind of a good pick. That's kind of a good pick. I mean, just if you want somebody who can shoot and defend on the wings relatively well, you put him with
maybe
Daniel
Solomon
House.
Hill. I might take Solomon Hill. I've been thinking about him a lot. Maybe Cole Aldridge.
Oh, wow. You're checking a lot of boxes here, man. You
I
could get
know.
Patrick O'Brien in there. You could get Johnny Bryant. You could get Mark Bryant.
I'm going to get Patrick McCaw.
You could get Joe Bryant. You could be fucking stacked with Bryants. That's for sure. Anyways, tune in to that this summer. It's not happening anytime soon because we got too much basketball to talk about, but we will do that eventually. Thank you guys for all of your questions. I hope that we answered a lot of them and that you guys were pleased with our answers and that you enjoyed our answers. If you want more of our content, of course, all of our full shows are on YouTube, talking NBA, NFL, and you can listen to all of our full episodes across all audio platforms. But we also have our video essays and video breakdowns on YouTube that you can see there. You can follow us across social, TikTok, Instagram @NerdSesh, Twitter @Nerd_Sesh to see clips from the show, graphics from the show, and all of our trivia content. And you can check out our merch if you want. That is linked at the link tree in our social media bios. And you can check out videos of Logan and I exploring each other's bodies also at our link tree. And you can join our Discord also if you want. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.